It is October 19th, 2016, and I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. And it's 7:06 approximately. On the agenda this evening, we have two variance hearings, one at 7:30, one scheduled for 7:50, and we have a continuation of a public hearing on proposed regulatory changes at 8:30. And as far as items not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of this meeting, we'll have a flu clinic update. And I think I'd like to add, we received notice from Barbara St. Andre that we need to have an executive session with her regarding a topic. So we'll just need to talk about scheduling that for the next, perhaps the next meeting.
The date of the next meeting is the 3rd.
Oh, is that the one that you're gone?
I will not be present.
We might, okay, so then part of, all right. Are there any other issues that have come up?
Is it something that in the
We'll
intervening?
come back to that in
Okay.
just a
I
second.
don't know if the agent has any, he won't be here until 7.
Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, rather than just a topic, I think that when you discuss it later, you'll be more clear about what the topic is, which is required to go into executive session.
We're not going into executive session tonight.
I
We
understand.
just need to talk about scheduling-wise, when can we have an executive session? Do we want to do it the next meeting? And then I was going to ask the question, after we were done with this, about whether we'd want to have a special meeting potentially, just on that.
Right, but the purpose of the executive session has to be stated.
Right. But right now, we're only talking about scheduling for an executive session,
Thank you for that.
as opposed to what it is, so. Because
So
we
once
need
you-
clarification.
Once you schedule it, it will be on the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
as to what it's-
Oh, yeah,
okay, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So, okay.
You're trying to get me in trouble.
And then, all right, so there's a potential if the agent has received anything this afternoon or so, or since sometime that there may be something else added, but any other issues arisen in the last 48 hours?
Not that I,
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve those additional items?
So moved.
And second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the flu clinic took place last night, and
Yes, fantastic. It was a good turnout. We had 2 hours straight of flu shots for residents, and I think we had pretty good numbers. Ellen, if you wanted to give the specific.
a total of 132 doses were administered, 64 children and 68 adults. It was busy. It was very busy.
And it ran well. Ellen had it all set up beforehand. So lots of volunteers from the Medical Reserve Corps who are there every year. So they're very seasoned, and that's always helpful. It's usually the paperwork up front that's the holdup, not giving the shots themselves. It's people who are veterans at this, it helps. So,
was there a distribution in the ages of the children and of the people
I
coming?
haven't gotten
No, but I mean, just a...
six to age 6, right up through, yeah,
a couple of 4-year-olds
4-year-olds.
Oh.
up to 18.
Mhm.
And 70s,
And then to
79 maybe.
80.
Yeah, 80.
82.
And were you administering
Yeah.
shots? Oh.
Yeah,
And
so
the
we had
nurse,
2.
was there a nurse?
Yep, Michelle, the nurse. So there were 2 stations for vaccination. But I guess the important thing to note is that the adolescent shots were state supplied, and anything above 18 was 18 and above was paid for by the residents of the town. So it was nice to have that support, because people want to get their shots here at home, not wait for their doctor's visits. So I think that's about the summary. And we were packed up and out of there by 8:30, so went well.
And
So
is
thank
there
you all.
another clinic scheduled?
No,
Okay.
one clinic this year.
All right. Do we have anything left over we have to send back?
We do. We gotta send it back till the very end.
There'll be other shots, perhaps, being done, maybe.
If there's interest.
Yeah.
And has there been any streamlining in the paperwork follow-up process that you have to do, or is it still lengthy?
There's a lot of paperwork to do now.
Some of it's billing.
The billing for the insurance, and then general input into the MIS, which is Mass Information.
Information system.
Yeah. It's a lot to do now.
Okay.
But we like to have big numbers, just not only because we serve the town, but it also is a dry run for mass dispensing of medications or vaccinations should they need a rise for emergency response. So
Because we're required to do a drill, and that's our drill.
That's good.
Yeah.
So it's a steady flow. So does that mean if we took the 100, however many, in 2 hours and multiplied that out, we could figure out how long it would take to get it down roughly?
yep.
Okay.
Which is essentially what we do.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions for them on that?
I'm just glad that we didn't pass today.
I'm glad we're not.
Yeah, and you can extrapolate if you bring in other physicians or nurses to give shots. You can extrapolate.
Who is in the
From
Reserve
there.
Corps?
So, Medical Reserve Corps.
Are they residents of Sherborn? or-
Oh, sure,
That's great.
Frank and Nancy House and Mr. Brody, Robert,
Johnson.
of course, Robert Johnson and Betsy.
Great.
Do you need that three?
Jean was there,
Do you need that three?
and
Moving on.
Vivian Onyet and Vicky, what's her name?
Hopefully I can go to the next one.
Lady. I'm blanking on her name. But they're there every year. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we want to make a pitch for any more volunteers?
Yes,
Okay.
we need them.
All right, so that is a pitch out there for anyone else who would like to join the Medical Reserve Corps for emergency preparedness in Sherborn. Okay. All right. So it takes care of flu clinic. Oh, and then on the executive session with town council, we can either have it the next meeting, but then you will miss it.
I'd
So-
love to be there.
Yeah, so,
Problem is, it would need to be this week or next week before.
it couldn't be this week because we don't have enough time to post, but.
Yeah. How much time do we need to post?
I wouldn't think long. Oh, to post, we need 48 hours in advance.
Can we do it Monday or Tuesday?
And it's subject to Barbara St. Andre's schedule as well, so.
I have to look at them.
So, but in terms of amount of time, if it was Monday, we'd have to get it in by tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
noon.
That's not going to happen.
So, right, we won't hear back from Barbara, probably.
Well, if we call her, maybe.
Yeah. You mean right now, or?
No. No, but I mean, do you want me to call in the morning or something? I mean,
No,
it's-
we'll
I'm the
send her
one
an
who has
email
the tight
and
schedule.
Ellen usually calls her and
Okay.
tries, so.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe if anyone has a good or a bad day, or maybe a bad day, and then we could relay that to Barbara. And I'm gonna guess it's probably going to be a half hour to an hour,
Hour, yeah.
perhaps, so then maybe,
24th is Monday. Be an hour anyway.
I don't know, I don't remember my schedule for next week, unfortunately. But, all right, so if everyone can just try to, if you have days that will not work next week, maybe let's start with that, and what time would a start time?
I'll say Monday and
Start time
Tuesday
be?
are the only days
Are the
that
only
I'm
days?
available
All
because
right,
I'm
so-
leaving the country
Oh, okay.
on Thursday.
All right, so it'll be Monday or Tuesday, otherwise maybe we could wait till the
Mm.
following meeting and maybe start early for the following meeting, because if
Sure.
we're gonna miss it anyway, if Monday and Tuesday are out, then we can combine it with that other meeting
Yeah.
and move up the start time.
Sure.
Okay.
It's the
November.
November 16th.
Mm,
Was it?
no,
No,
November.
November 3rd?
November 2 is a Wednesday.
Yeah, she won't, right, but I don't know that we can wait
That's
on
fine.
this. I
Oh,
think it's,
okay.
it has a, there's deadlines associated with it. All right, so I guess
Monday's
just
the special
watch for
town meeting.
emails to see what day it might be.
Yeah, and Monday's a special town meeting, I think, right?
Yes. But this would, we could do earlier. Do you know when the special town meeting starts? 7?
7. So that's
7, okay. So we could potentially meet 5:30.
Does the town council come to the town meeting for any reason?
Usually.
So maybe just
Maybe she'll
to,
be in town
just to
anyway.
make everybody's schedule better, preceding the meeting.
We could try- So what's the earliest you could do?
I'm, everything that I have scheduled on Monday afternoon, I can move.
Okay, so if 5 or something was the goal, would that 5 potentially work for you?
Not sure. I have no idea what my
Yeah,
schedule is.
I'm not positive either. I didn't bring.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a sports drop off at 6, so don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see what she says and then try to figure it out then. All right, so that's 2 items. Okay. Food establishment inspection reports. All right. So, just look at the basic ones first. We just received these this evening, so. So this is in the packet that you have from tonight's stack.
I'm just putting this on the calendar.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Could you just note what establishments you reviewed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Unitarian Church, and we'll come back to that because there's a special issue for that. Walgreens, C&L Frosty, Simji's Rustic Pizza, Sherborn Market, and Dunkin' Donuts.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just noticing for one of them that had some violations, the person, or the staff is going to be getting some extra training, and they're gonna have a re-inspection later in the month. And then,
Those are non-critical violations.
yes. Oh, no, this one also had some critical for the training, the one with the training.
And then that one.
Yeah, that's the one I'm on. So there was a plan for correction, I would assume. Okay, so for critical, must be corrected within 10 days.
So the date was...
One of them was the chicken prep on the cutting board. Slicing machine.
Could you tell us what we were discussing?
Right now, we're talking about Simji's Rustic Pizza.
Okay, so Alan, once we have a critical issue that needs to be resolved in 10 days, I assume the food inspector that we have is going to go back in.
I would assume.
Okay. Okay. Seems like these are things that could be easily corrected with cleaning the slicing machine, cleaning the mixer.
Can you see 4? I only see 3. It says they have 4 violations, but I only see 3.
Okay. So, do you have Simji's Pizza?
Yep, Somebody's Pizza.
Okay, so you're going to go down to C, critical versus N, non-critical. Bottom left, first page. Right here.
Yeah.
Critical 4, that's what I'm referring to, and then I'm turning the page over. And it's talking about raw chicken on the cutting board. Slicing machine that needs
Yeah.
more
So maybe it just is in the same category as
acute
3.
cleaning. The mixer needs cleaning. A lot of cleaning issues, I guess.
He does say re-inspections.
Thank you. Re-inspection October 24th, so.
That's good.
So I guess we ought to have this on the next agenda for the 1st of November.
Follow up.
Okay. Non-critical, non-critical. CNL, non-critical. Walgreens, nothing. It's basically just 2 coolers, I think, for beverages. So what's the issue
Okay,
with
so the
Unitarian?
Unitarian Church. Let me just reread it to make sure that my recollection is correct on this.
I think it was
I
with
think-
Serve Safe allergy training, having a specific individual who's been trained.
And I think it's also the type of permit they have, and there's a question about whether they have, in essence, a category higher level of permit than maybe what they need, then they don't have the trained staff to meet the requirements of the permit they have. So they could either reclassify. Is that, am I getting that roughly? You know, the general gist is
The
the,
permit's the same.
oh, it is, oh, okay.
All the churches are the same.
Oh, okay, I thought they had a slightly different one for,
So I guess the question is, if there's food being prepared or pre-prepared food being served, they would need to meet the specifications of a allergy training and food safety certification individual associated with this, the church. I guess they could be reassigned if there's a claim that it's just simply a coffee or beverage only.
It's a food inspector.
food inspector question.
Right, I guess I was thinking that the PHFs, the potentially hazardous foods, that if they did not serve those, would they still need the training for the person? Do you know offhand? I thought that they might not. Okay, so I was thinking it was established at the permit level. So, all right, here's the thing. They have a permit. They had indicated that they might have PHFs, potentially hazardous foods. That needs training. They don't have anybody with the training. They've been notified a couple of times about that. But then someone who's relatively new there also said that they don't serve any potentially hazardous foods. So if they could resolve that, then maybe that would clear up the requirement. Or if they are serving this sort of food, then they need to have training. And so the question is, if they don't work this out, the food inspector and the church, I was thinking we could invite them into the next meeting to go over it. And before I take...
Yeah, because even donuts on a Sunday morning is potentially hazardous food,
Oh,
clearly.
is it? Okay.
Oh, sure, because peanut, tree nut.
Oh, okay. Oh, and that kind of hazardous as opposed to the preparing and introducing a hazard. I
Sure.
get it now. Okay, thank
And
you.
that gets to the point of the food inspectors noting no allergy training individuals, so.
Okay. All right. Yes?
I have to speak up on behalf of my own church, because you're looking at the Unitarian Church, but I can assure you that all three churches in town are going to face the same issue. And the issue is that the regulation doesn't take account of the way a small town church is staffed and run and how the kitchen operates. The fact is, a whole bunch of volunteers are using this kitchen, and the regulations say that there has to be I don't know what the official word is, but basically a trade license certified.
1 second. Can you hear him from his seat?
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to make this too formal, but I'll come to a microphone. My point is that this is going to affect all three churches, all right? I cannot speak for Pilgrim Church. However, I am the person in Pilgrim Church responsible for the operation of our kitchen. We've taken great pains to institute sanitation operations and so forth, and we have all the sanitation equipment, and we wipe down surfaces and so forth between operations. We just routinely dispose of out-of-date food and so forth. We've pretty much always had pretty clean operations and inspections. We have thermometers in all the right places, we maintain all the right temperatures and so forth. But your food inspector has identified at the Unitarian Church, and will ultimately identify at both Pilgrim Church and also at St. Teresa's, that there is no designated food handling expert on staff. And the regulations are written that that person must be on staff but can assign their responsibilities as if they leave, et cetera, et cetera. But as you just heard Chris allude to, we have different families that serve snacks after church every Sunday. A different family every Sunday. There could be 20 different families who are, bringing in food and serving it to congregation, and somehow the regulations don't take account of that. And the regulations are written, obviously, I think, like many regulations, looking at big towns and big operations, and maybe churches that have full-time staff. But most of our churches are staffed by part-time people, and the part-time people certainly know about the kitchen, and there are volunteers like myself who take care of the kitchen and try to make sure that it's up to snuff and that we pass inspections. But when it comes to this supervisory issue, all right, it can't be met. It can't be met because of the nature of the staffing. It can't be met because of the nature of the way that kitchen is used. AA comes in every Wednesday night to our church and serves over 100 people. All right, they serve coffee and donuts. They cook coffee, and they have other packaged goods, I guess, that they distribute. but there's no supervision there, all right? They're self-regulated, they're self-supervised, they follow the rules of the kitchen that are there, and so forth. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that you endeavor to find a way that, and it may even in fact be a variance to the regulations, but you will, a rigid enforcement of this issue, all right, will close 3 church kitchens. And I don't know that that is really what your intent is, or that that is an effective way for the community to proceed. I don't want to be in your seat because it's a difficult conundrum, but it is a problem. It does need a resolution. Your food inspector has raised it, but I will tell you that it is not just the Unitarian Church. It will have broad implications unless we can find some amicable resolution or compromise.
But we just addressed the 3 churches not several months ago or a year ago on the sinks and
Right,
designated
yeah,
sinks.
hand washing sinks and so
Was-
forth, and that's been addressed. And
Wasn't the food allergy training issue part of that assessment, or did?
no, the issue becomes, who do you train? There are literally unknown numbers of people who are going to be involved in that kitchen, and there is not a kitchen supervisor.
So was that not addressed when we looked at the sinks issue, or?
You looked at the operation of the kitchen and the equipment that's in the kitchen, and how to deal with hand washing and making sure it's kept separate, and sanitation processes are in place. And they have been greatly improved, by the way. That effort was not without effect, because I know my own kitchen, we've instituted sanitation procedures. We've gotten the right equipment for sanitizing counters and so forth. We've instructed people on the proper
Right.
use of
But
the...
that wasn't just a review of sinks, wasn't that a review of the operations?
Oh, every inspection is a review of the operation. This is the first time this issue has ever
Well, I think we
basically
need to
raised its head.
do each individually and find out if they do have someone trained, and if St. Teresa's and...
Well, I can assure you, okay,
And
you
if they
found that
don't-
Unitarian doesn't. I know that I can speak for Pilgrim Church. Pilgrim Church doesn't have someone trained. We have someone that could be trained. The church administrator who is there 5 days a week, for 7 to 8 hours a day, could be trained, could be certified, but it would be to not much effect when a miscellaneous family is doing coffee hour after church on Sunday morning,
Well,
or when AA comes in on Wednesday night,
So
or
here's-
Council on Aging comes in and serves lunch on a Thursday afternoon.
So here's what I was thinking.
So I'm just trying to scope the problem for you, and unfortunately landing it in your lap. Sorry.
well, maybe it isn't in our lap. I mean, clearly, the workings of a kitchen is within our purview, and clean sinks and dirty sinks is within our purview, but maybe not in our purview is allergy training necessarily for all 3 churches, because you can depend on the individual or the individual families to handle that aspect if the 3 churches are going to be able to meet. But I don't have an understanding of the other 2 St. Teresa's, especially whether there's someone trained or not, to expect the other 2 to do it, or if it's more reasonable not to expect any of the 3 and just have individual families take on the allergy issue and just waive that aspect of. But definitely the facility and the cleanliness and dirty sink, clean sink, I think is within our purview, but that's my opinion.
I think the question maybe we need to ask the food inspector, is there a new state law that's requiring this sort of thing in every public kitchen? Because I think probably at the heart of all of this is liability protection. Who's liable if somebody brings in peanuts or peanut-based donuts, and then somebody has anaphylaxis and a kid dies? Who the family's going to sue everyone. I don't know who's responsible. I agree with you. It sounds it's sort of unrealistic in practice, but I don't really know what the foundation is, and maybe we need a legal opinion before we give variances, because I don't want to be responsible if somebody dies because we decided that it was unrealistic and therefore decided to bypass state law, because we didn't write the law. And I imagine the food inspector is just following whatever regulations he's told to follow. I've never heard this before. Maybe it's a new thing based on some horrible thing that happened in some random town. I don't know. So I don't think anybody wants to. I think that we all understand how churches work, and we also understand that everyone is always going to have the best intention. So maybe we need to find out what the basis of this regulation is, and try to figure out if there's a way
Okay, so
to,
one thing we can do right now is
help
ask
everybody.
Mark to, who serves as food inspector elsewhere,
As well as here previously, unless the Board of Health...
can
has-
enlighten us.
Yeah, unless the Board of Health has changed anything right now, and unfortunately it varies town to town. There is no code that requires churches to be allergen trained or certified food managers on staff. That's in the merged food code of Massachusetts. I do work in another community that requires all food facilities that handle potentially hazardous foods to have both. The allergen training is easy, and I would recommend to this board that you don't forget that. Allergen training is very important. And again, it's exempted from churches and nonprofits and so forth. I don't know why. I think when the state goes to force these form these codes, they sometimes look at a bigger picture. But in my view, the allergen training is a matter of watching a video and you get certified. It's only $10 and it's always been that way. I suggest that highly. I can't tell you it's required, but I recommend it highly. As it relates to the certified food manager, unless there's knowledge, and I don't mean to go against your food inspector, I'm just explaining what I would recommend. I would recommend that if this knowledge is lacking when it comes to serving potentially hazardous foods, then I would state that that would be an appropriate regulation to enact. It depends. I can only explain from my knowledge that these kitchens are not used for a tremendous amount of food preparation. From what I could see, they're used for just your morning or afternoon events where people bring in food or donuts, coffee, that type of thing, which are not potentially hazardous foods, but they are hazardous with respect to what Chris said, allergens. I'm very concerned about allergens. They do offer now, and the board may want to look at it and talk to your food inspector, they offer something called a certified food handler. And in other places that I'm working at, we're requiring that when there's lack of knowledge being transferred at a facility from the certified food manager to the staff. That's required in the food code, not for churches. But that is a matter of another easy, user-friendly, video, web-based training. So, and it's very inexpensive. I would suggest that as a minimum. Again, I do not want to interfere with your food inspector, but that's what I can offer on my background.
Okay, so it's...
so there's not so churches are exempt.
Unless something changed that I don't know about. I will not go against what your food inspector's saying, but I'm not aware of it, is all I'm saying.
Okay, so maybe we could change this to inviting the food inspector to
Yeah.
come and
Yeah, I
let's
would
talk
suggest
about
Yeah.
what he's seeing out in the field in Sherborn.
Yeah.
What might we need, but what could be more of a recommendation, as Peter was saying, they have an administrator available who might have the training and
But
post
he's
signs
right,
or
though. I
share
mean,
some other information where it would fall perhaps in between what a standard food establishment might have for requirements, and then to promote the awareness within the churches might be the other approach to take. And
But if it's
discuss it
also-
with him
yeah.
about what he's seeing.
and it's true, people use the space, but the minister isn't there, and, the administrative staff isn't there. And is it a matter of including it in the original arrangements that are made when they schedule those meetings for them to say that the church takes no liability and therefore we can say they don't need to worry? I mean, it's probably,
Right, there
I would
may be-
imagine it's founded in liability protection, which is sad, but true. And
So the other piece might be asking the food inspector to do some research before coming to the meeting to verify the status of state code on this. And then,
Darryl, may I just add, his second bullet may be the reason, his second bullet in that letter. If they are indeed acting as a caterer, then they're not acting as a church anymore.
right, I think
They
they're
are-
distributing meals, was that,
And that is, he has a right to ask for that.
within town?
Yeah, If
Okay.
they're doing that, then indeed, they're not acting any longer as a church facility.
But wouldn't it be the entity that is involved with preparing the food?
Well,
Not the church, it would be
Correct,
whoever's
correct.
preparing the food that needs to have that training. So if they're coming from outside, it could be required of them by the church, not we telling the church that they have to do it.
That's right. So whenever they have. a
And that
kid-
would be more
That's-
practical.
Yeah, and I don't know if the church is acting as a caterer, if they're allowing caterers to come in for events, by all means, that caterer is required to submit the certified food manager's certificate, who will be acting at that event, as well as their allergen certificate, and their license showing they're a certified caterer.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the Unitarian Church would have to have someone, if
Yeah.
the caterer has it.
Right.
That's correct, that's what I was
Or
just saying. So the
a-
caterer is the responsible party to be the certified food manager and have one on staff at the event. Say they're having a catered dinner. That caterer is required to have a certified food manager who is also allergen trained at the event. And they are to notify the Board of Health, submit their certificates, as well as notification as where they have their catering license. Because there's a difference between catering license.
Well, it sounds like we're circling back to where we started,
Right,
which
so
was...
let's-
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is everyone agreed to invite
Yeah.
the food inspector to the
It would
next
be
meeting?
really nice if the
Assuming
church is
everything
exempt,
that-
because then we don't have to, or if we could find a way to ensure that whoever's using the space fulfill this requirement, and the church can go, doesn't have to worry, because it's not really,
And they can know what their options are. There
Yeah.
could be awareness or something. The goal is still to have some awareness, but I think folks are fairly
Yeah, I mean,
aware.
I don't want to regulate out people getting
know.
together and
Right.
doing something nice for the community, so that's where I would come in with its individual responsibility on just
Yeah.
these after-church Sunday events. But if it's a catered event, the caterer can have the credentials, and I think that'd be a fair settlement, but usually we don't want to put burden on churches. I mean, they have other things to worry about and do.
Okay, so we're running a little behind. Yes, question?
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I just was curious, is this a new food inspector? In other words, is this the first time?
Been here, what, a year maybe?
Who is the food inspector? What's the name?
Michael Saracen.
And that, the letter that you were reading is from him?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Just before you leave this subject, because of further
Yeah,
complication.
let's be quick.
I'm sorry, I know you're
15
behind
minutes
schedule,
behind.
but a further complication, the Council on Aging, I think as you know, serves senior citizens lunch out at Pilgrim Church every Thursday. There is another wide variety of people who provide the food for that, all right? Have
Lately.
provided and so forth. And it's an admittedly wide variety. Some of them bring in previously prepared food. Some of them prepare food there. Marianne Morse Nursing Home very kindly at one time set up a grill and, my gosh, gave hamburgers and cheeseburgers and had a whole picnic spread, right? Marianne Morse Nursing Home didn't come with a catering license or anything else. So I will only point out that you've got a huge variety of circumstances that that need to be addressed.
Okay, so,
And it's not just the churches, but it's how the church facilities are used, and the civic operations that go on at the churches. Thank you.
okay, so Ellen, if you could send him an email and ask if he can make the next meeting, and also be prepared to talk about exact letter of the law and options that we could consider for the churches in town. And since he works in a number of towns, I believe, what are examples of what they're doing in other towns?
And he's a trainer, so he should know these things. Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, great. So I apologize, but we do have a variance hearing that was scheduled for 7:30. It's for a septic replacement. And are there any abutters to 83 Mason Hill Road here this evening?
I don't have any green cards yet.
Ah, okay.
I need a copy of the letter that was sent to you.
Okay, well, if anyone is interested, the applicant's enter will be presenting, and if you'd like to look at the plans as it's being explained why the variances are being requested, please feel free to come up.
would it be, it would be helpful for me, since if you could go over the history of, or are you planning to do that? Whichever one is the one that's complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, the next one. Okay.
Good evening, I'm Dickinson with Civilized Solutions, here on behalf of the applicant. Project is 83 Nason Mill Road. It's an existing 5-bedroom, single-family home. The existing septic system is located in this area. It is in failure, failed in Title V. The on-site well is located just south of the garage in the front yard. There's the associated buffer. That being said, we did our testing over in this area. We were able to get a system in. It's going to be a pump system, 4 stone trenches. Given that, we are requesting 2 variances from the local regulations.
Okay. And just, green cards, how'd they look?
Yeah, I just
All
checked.
set? Perfect.
The first variance is from section 5.1C. It's to allow the soil absorption system to be designed on the basis of 2 test pits in the primary versus 3 test pits. There's a lot of trees, as you can see, my tree line in here. In this area, we just didn't want to get in there and take down more trees if we need to at the time.
Okay, and Mark, any comments? I assume
No,
you-
I think they, I wasn't available for the testing, but they, both test holes are showing within reason, the same soil, the sand. There was a fine rainy sand lower than that. They also tested what they call the subsoil BW layer.
Thank you.
And with that there, they have sufficient soil to, and testing, I believe, to request this thing.
Okay.
Motion on that?
Second.
Okay, any other questions? Does anyone have questions? Okay.
It's going to remain same bedroom, obviously. Same width.
Okay, seems reasonable. Again, we've got the usual situation, pre-existing system. You want to get setbacks from wells and from other features, and there's just a certain, once, for folks who have seen it, once you draw a well, in this case, here's where the well is, you have a circle that you can draw around it of the distance you want to try and stay away from both that well and any neighbor's wells, and that ends up leaving little pieces of land where you are trying to then fit the septic, find the right soils, and other features. So our goal is certainly to do an improvement over what's there. Was in failure, I'm assuming.
Yeah, okay.
So it will be an improvement to what is there now, and want to have people continue to live in their homes. So I don't have any other questions or issues. All those in favor of
Aye.
granting this variance? Aye.
The second variance is section 8.02, is to allow the soil absorption system to be in an area with less than 5 feet of natural grade above high groundwater. We have some 52 inches, we have 30 inches. Therefore, the areas that we tested is the groundwater less than 5 feet. And due to the buffers, we want to concentrate our testing in this area.
Okay. And are you doing any particular things to, are you mounding the system?
It's going to, yeah, it's actually going to be mounted as well as stepped.
Okay.
Where's the 30-inch one?
The 30-inch, good too. This one,
That makes sense.
yeah.
So you will, though, achieve, since you're not asking for the other, I assume you're achieving the 5-foot separation once you mount?
4
Or
feet.
4?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was like greater than 200 per
Okay.
You're doing 5 feet. You don't need a waiver. You're okay, you're 5 feet to ground. That's what your scale shows. You go to
Okay.
the scale.
Oh, okay.
The scale's okay. Your scale down the bottom, Eric, shows
Oh,
5 feet. You did a great job, man.
Here?
Because you show not just the scale.
Oh,
you
yeah,
show-
okay. Yep, you're right.
Oh.
You did a good job.
Oh, that's nice. I like
Yeah.
that.
Not just the steps shown there, he also shows
Yeah.
the actual elevations.
Okay, so does that need an edit, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know you had
So-
4 on this. I just
I didn't see that either.
It is 5 feet.
Okay.
Right, thanks.
Stepped.
All right. When we get to that part, we will request a,
Nice.
maybe a manual correction or something for the records. Okay, do we have a motion?
There's no variance. If it's-
There is, because they're mounding.
30
They're going to
inch.
have one of the separations, but the naturally
Okay.
deposited soil separation.
Well, it's actually to put in a septic system in an area where groundwater was found in the first 5 feet.
That's right, 30 inches.
That's a section.
So,
Yeah.
motion on that variance?
Second.
And any other Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I think we can, was there anything else that you think might have been overlooked? Okay. So,
Which is a deed recording, which will be.
okay, so I'm going to, okay, so I'll close the hearing then, and the plan is
I
ready for
recommend
approval
It's conditional to the deed recording for the garbage grinder.
and to the correction.
Construction, and this is the other, because of the fact that the system's existence, you're gonna see it on the next plan as well. The water line's not shown right now, but I'm asking if the board can make that a condition of the as-built. And pre-construction, I didn't say.
Okay, then do we have a motion to approve the plan as presented, conditional to correction of the 4-foot to 5-foot notation on the plan, receipt of a garbage grinder deed restriction, a pre-construction meeting, and inclusion of the water line at the time of the as-built would be sufficient?
And if I may, it does refer you to a table that 4 feet is. I wouldn't have a problem to design a home and plan is just have an initial insert.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, just to cross
Just
out.
circle the table, see table, which
Oh,
shows
okay.
the 5 feet.
Okay.
Motion.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor of approval of the plan subject to the conditions?
Aye.
Okay.
I would like that plan because I need the tree line.
Oh.
Indicated. I'm saying what tree? I wasn't out there, so if you want to take these over, just initial. Yeah. If you don't mind that.
Yeah, and that way we could
Just initial.
just get them ready
Okay. Thanks,
for
Eric.
when the deed restriction comes in. Okay, so now amazing, kind of close. We have a variance hearing for a septic replacement at 211 Farm Road. Are there any abutters for this hearing? Okay, so if you would like, you can come up. The engineer is going to present the information, prompting the need to request the variances, and we're going to go over that. So if you'd like to look at the plans as we're looking at them and discussing it, you're very welcome to come up and do so. And, hi, green card's all set?
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
This is 211 Farm Road, proposal to replace a failed septic system.
He likes to see
Oh,
that.
sorry. Yeah, this is one of those weird properties where there's a big common driveway coming up from Farm Road, and then the lot goes from Farm Pond all the way down to Fort. It's actually a 9-acre parcel. That's kind of a blip of it there. But there's a big common driveway which feeds all these houses.
That's not the new house on the corner, or it is?
This one? Oh, the new house on the corner is right here.
Right there.
Yeah.
Can you show that again?
So this is existing?
This is an existing house, yes. So this kind of sits like that. So there's Farm Pond, this is the whole lot. We're really concentrated up here. This is like a big common drive that
Yeah,
services
yeah.
all these houses. So yeah, so everything you see here is existing. These buildings are existing, the driveway. So again, this is a proposal to replace a failed septic system. The current system now is just a couple of these circles here, which are just leaching pits that are in failure. It's a 5-bedroom house. You can see we are on Farm Pond. On top of that, we have a wetland pocket here, and we have wetlands directly across the driveway here. So we show this heavy red line here would be the 100-foot buffer zone. On top of that, we have an abutting well right here. This well is located downhill from the septic area. On top of that, we have very fast perk rates, so that well carries a 175-foot setback. And that's what this big arc is here, that's 175. So between the buffer zones to the wetlands and the setback to the well, and between these structures, we have a fairly small area here to site a system.
This is the well that serves.
That's our
this well.
existing well, yeah.
And
I'll get to
is
that,
up-
I'll get to that
Oh, all
later.
right.
So the good thing here is the soil conditions were fantastic. It was all sand and gravel. This sits up very high off the pond, so there's no groundwater issues. So because of that, we were able to design a conventional system, fully sized, for the 5-bedroom, just using conventional stone trenches. With that being said, we are asking for a couple variances here. One is the town of Sherborn requires a 125-foot setback between the leaching field and a wetland. So we're asking for a waiver to 105. And again, it's because we're kitty cornered between the setback, the buildings, and so forth.
Well, it's just one corner, most of it's 120.
The rest is, yeah, it's just, so if you put, a scale on that, it's probably 10% of the system at most.
Conservation Commission is already.
We're all
saying
approved
on
through
that.
conservation, yes, with the erosion control and so forth. The second waiver variance we're asking for is to our own well. This well is located here, again, it's downhill. That combined with the fast perk rate, that carries 175-foot setback, and we were able to get it to 161. So those are the two variances.
More importantly, you have 175 days.
That's, yeah.
Which is what
That's
we'd
impressive.
like to see. And so this is a continuation of their property here, and any issue with any will.
No, yeah, this is the only one that we have any concerns with.
Anything else?
Not yet.
So, right, our hope is that the distance is reduced to someone's own well, and will take care of the system much more, and it won't be an additional burden on the neighborhood.
And the state minimum is 100. So
I mean, the soil is fantastic.
it's great, yeah.
It's fantastic in a way that it's a relative. What is
Well,
that right
if
there?
it was me, I would rather, it was less than 2, it was all sand. I would rather have that in a smaller area than, worry about the well setback, to 150 or so forth. I would rather have, because of that good soil conditions, we were able to fit a fully sized conventional system in there with the 2 factors.
It's gravity fed. You want some motions and take them together or take us separately?
Yeah, let's do them separately, and then, so there's another sequence of construction, so let's deal with that next. Let's take care of these two variants.
A motion on the first variance? 10.2.
I move to support the motion as stated.
I'll second that.
Are you
Want to second it?
seconding it?
Oh, you moved, excuse me, second.
Okay, and anybody got any questions?
Well, I was just
on
gonna
that?
say, that's my wife. I'm the abutter, and I see no problem with the system. I think I've been living there for 25 years, and the discharge is in the same area anyway. We've had no problems. I'm not aware of any problems they've had with their own well over those 25 years, so I think I endorse it.
Great.
And where are you living?
We're right next door to the gym,
Oh, okay.
and so it doesn't affect us directly, but it looks like a very good system to me.
So, any other questions? All those in favor of carrying this variance?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion on variance 2, 10.1.
Second.
Any issues on that? And that really is, it's one site issue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then request to change the sequencing of construction.
Okay, so as part of this project, the owner wants to demolish the existing house and build a new dwelling. We're not changing bedrooms, 5-bedroom house now, proposing a 5-bedroom house. We want to discuss, so this would be the proposed. okay, this building would stay, the house would go, this garage would go, and this would be the driveway coming in here. The problem we have is this lot is extremely restricted for access. Just to dig these test holes with a rubber tire backhoe because of this slope, we had to take down a portion of this garage. We had to rip it down with a bucket just to get in here to do this. So our concern is that the town, in a situation like this, the town policy is to build the system, construct the system, hook it up to the house, then allow the existing dwelling to come down and construct the new house. The
And
problem,
I'll say, part of the reason for doing that is to allow for variances that can go with the replacement system. If it's new construction, you don't have the benefit of those variances. So it's just a way that's been developed over the years so that people can have an existing home, have a property that's being lived at.
Right.
It's a way to get another system in there that wouldn't meet the requirements of
the
the
local requirements,
So-
yes. So part of our concerns here is that when this system gets built and put in, access and construction, there's going to be some heavy equipment in here, taking this dwelling down and then pouring a foundation and constructing a dwelling. I don't have concern once this driveway is in and the house is up per se, because a lot of the people that work inside and so forth can use this. But during construction, I have some concerns on protecting that system.
And the ability to keep those off of the system.
Yes, because of, the direct access, once this garage comes down, this is going to be, you can see the existing driveway underneath. This driveway is not here. So their access is going to be here. And on top of that, that's gray, this gray thing. That's going to be the driveway.
You just flip that back.
Why can't they do the driveway first?
Well, it all happens simultaneously.
What will happen is that the existing contours are here now, they're going to become, we're taking basically the top of the hill down by about 4 feet. And then what will happen is they'll have machines in to excavate for the foundation. And it's really at that point that it's going to be, it's going to be difficult to do excavation really on this side of the house without having access to the front, which will, it's going to be, it'll be a challenge if we can't run the system. I'm not, quite sure how.
And we have further restrictions with conservation. We established a limit of work perimeter where we can't go beyond that. So, this is literally 10 to 12 feet, 10 to 12 feet on here. So, this is not going to be, this is going to be the access up into here. So we just have some concerns on maintaining that system, protecting that system during construction. So we're just wondering if there's something else we could do there.
So, and see, we have a few related precedents that are nothing exactly like this, which is always the challenge. Everything's
Yeah.
different each time. Some other factors. Do you have any particular
Couple
comments? or
notes. I
questions?
haven't been on the site. I wasn't the person that did the testing or the soil testing. But one note would be they haven't tested the area where the new house is being proposed for groundwater. It's part of our requirements. And again, I wasn't there for the testing, so I don't know if it was even noted at that time. But that would be something that would have to be done. I was not involved with the groundwater adjustment with questioning valley versus hillside. I would ask the engineer maybe to explain if he worked with the previous person. And again, it's difficult because I'm in the middle of picking up something that someone else was doing. Those two factors come to light. Then the other factor that comes to light is this demolition reconstruction and how the board plans to preserve the regulations. And I just offered you that advice. And I know you said we had some other issues that were based on dilapidated. I haven't been on the site to know if the house is dilapidated or not.
So Mark, respectfully, we're dealing with water around this entire thing at 200 feet. And the
Yes.
builder's talking about, we're almost at 230. I guess I'm not having the same level of concern on groundwater that you are.
Oh, no.
No,
In
no, I
our
didn't-
code, since they're bringing everything down by 4 feet, our code has a requirement for 2 feet, right?
That is
Separation
correct. I'm just
between
talking
the
about
bottom
the need
of the
for-
basement and high groundwater. So I don't know if you've had a chance to calculate that.
In the past, I know we've taken the test kits that were done and the calculations that we could do relative
It's
to
up to the
approximate.
engineer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's up to the engineer. If I could, Madam Chair, I'd leave that up to the engineer. I'm in the middle of this one, so I'd leave it up to the engineer if he's comfortable. What they would do is this.
Right.
I don't use the G word a lot, guarantee, but there's no way there's groundwater. I mean, the house
I can't
is
imagine.
at the highest point.
Right.
We dug holes here, I want to say 13 feet.
Yeah, you were down 13.
13 feet, and, you know, granted, it was July, but we did a frontage calculation and adjusted that 4.5 feet. We're probably 20 feet above the wetlands.
It's
That's
just-
one of my questions.
Yeah, there's,
Okay.
and I'm very confident that if anything, we're conservative with our groundwater.
And if I may, what you just said is important,
Yeah.
that he's 20 feet above the wetlands. And is that farm pond too, Joe?
Yes.
Then I feel
Okay.
more confident, as comfortable as.
Because we don't want-
as
I
confident.
guess you're gonna be doing the house?
Yes.
That you get to the point of taking off 4
Right.
feet and then digging down and
Yeah, if you saw the site.
sitting in water, and that would just be bad.
This
Find
little
out.
path here is
So-
literally like 50 stairs going up to this area.
Oh.
It sits way up high.
No, okay.
I would base it on farm pond. It's difficult to do frontal methods
Yeah.
in a drought. So the method used, I wouldn't recommend. I would recommend, and I'm doing this based on the drought, that they look at other factors such as wetlands, pond elevation. It's difficult to say this is exactly in a valley, but it's on a hillside. And that would throw the issue of fronter being utilized.
I
out,
agree.
You know,
I agree.
But I wasn't involved, so Joe was following
No, but
right
I-
the lead of what he was doing.
If any
The ideas of the water
calculation
bodies-
is conservative.
Yeah,
I
being
agree.
really established.
You want this water
and
around.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, picture it being mounted. So, okay, so so we're back to when the house goes in, there's some assurance that there should not, will not be any kind of problem with it sitting in water and being sufficiently above. So here's what I'm seeing. We've had some changes to connections from the existing house to the replacement system, and there have been times when that's been varied and the connection hasn't been made for various reasons. So it's a little bit related to this, but I see this 93 Elliott Street as being a little more similar. That one was, as you referred to, a dilapidated house, and we've had another one recently where the structure was so unsafe to be even people work around. Again, that's not the case here, but the risk to the integrity of the septic system, soil absorption system, and then the Conservation Commission's restrictions on where you can go instead, because if you could go around the other way and install that,
I mean, we can't
and
even
separate, but you're limited because of the other regulatory restrictions that make it possible. So if we required you to, my concern is if we required you to put it in now, its efficacy might be affected by having heavy stuff run over it and getting
That's my
crushed.
concern, that's
And so,
Well, it will. I mean, you're gonna crush some elements because they've already had to take down part of a barn to just get access now. So, just so I'm clear, you wanna build this thing after the new house?
might there be some other point to catch it, they get in the foundation and things, so it's not the complete house, but it's the new foundations established and then the lines? Could any of that
From my
potentially
perspective, I mean, if we
work?
just get the foundation and get the frame up, roof on, sided, and then we no longer have walls on site, I think at that point, it would maybe be a good time to do the system.
Okay. So that, that's,
The board is
Mostly
looking
there,
at,
but-
what we asked for other considerations on repairs is up to rough electrical. But it's it's usually based on a dilapidated structure, so you should have something to base it on.
Well, here, I think it's the Conservation Commission's requirements and restrictions on the site that are preventing an alternative, because I think if it was all grass and they were free to go around the other side, then sure, we could ask for that. But we don't have that
It's
option.
underground, so you're gonna run over it, you're gonna crush some components. When the house starts to go up, you can see it and work around what you can see. If you do it the other way around, it doesn't make sense, because you're gonna damage something and it's not gonna work.
Well, that's the main reason why we said the septic system should only after the new house is built, the new construction.
Right.
That's exactly why we said that.
So are there any other things that we, I mean, there's
Well, there's also
reasons
hillside.
driving this, but it's still that idea of preserving the idea of a replacement system and being consistent about the system is replacing what was there to serve the old house.
I don't know.
And that formality, it's somewhat a formality, but
I don't know if it matters, but like I said at the beginning, we're replacing exact bedrooms. So under Title V's definition of new construction, it's a new, a vacant lot or additional bedrooms added to the system. So I think under Title V, it still technically can be considered a repair because it's 5 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms on a previously developed lot. It's not like we're trying to get that
Right.
extra
Does it
bedroom.
discuss the footprint when it makes that,
I'm sorry?
does it discuss the footprint? Doesn't it also refer to footprint or?
Title V?
No, when the definition is repair, when it's the same number of bedrooms. I know that because I read it. Just
I
recently.
don't know if we have to bring Title V.
I was trying to remember.
I'm just saying, if it helps, we're not looking to add that
Just
extra
stick with
bedroom
it.
like the policy has been.
Local, stick with
Yeah,
that.
it's just local.
That's clear.
The variances that were offered did not reach any of the major waivers that are variances that we see. They were distance waivers, both within a small percentage, the 105 versus 125, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the other one was the 161 versus the 175 with the fact it's their own on-site well. So I'm not trying to build up either side of this.
Right.
I respect the side of the fact we have to, one has to be concerned about the next person coming in. So, at the same time, how, I look at the reality of it, it's just the waivers being requested are minimal compared to if they were asking for a reduction in size or distance to groundwater.
Well, I think based on the restrictiveness, based on the wetlands and wet content.
right.
But there's also, it looks like hillside, and for the safety of the workers, I mean, if we're going to force them to run along an angle there and tip over their equipment, I think that should be a consideration that we need to take into account to grant the waiver of the variance.
Yeah, it's interesting, because otherwise, right, people more room for the movement rather than trying to squish in between. I was gonna make a motion that we allow demolition of the existing home and construction of the new home up to frame. Framing, is that how you describe it, pretty
We
much?
say, roof on and then the exterior siding complete.
Okay.
That way we no longer have logs on the site, there's not really going to be any heavy equipment
Okay,
on the
so,
property.
right, I
What's
guess
the law of hoist?
Yeah, it's a big forklift that they kind of drop it on the site with.
Okay, so to allow construction up until that point, and then require that the septic system be installed at that point and be completed prior to, what did you say, electrical?
Rough electrical,
Okay,
up to rough electrical.
okay, up to.
It's prior
So,
to the-
because I assume once you get that established, then you're gonna keep going there and be installing
So-
over here.
Right, but
So
so
there'd be a
I'm just
little bit of a-
concerned that like, it's March and we can't get the system in and the rough electrical's done and now I just don't have to stop work waiting for, favorable weather to get the system in. So, I'm not sure how to handle
You don't need a system at that point. You have a
Right, but I don't
porta
have
potty or
to, I
something.
don't have to stop if we've said
course.
that,
Yeah, of
once the
course.
rough electrical's done, we then have to get the system in.
Yeah, I don't know why we're restricting that, because you have a porta potty and you have a gravity flow, so you don't even need electrical to pump.
No, it's just a way of sort of making sure
Checkpoint.
things all.
Just like the timeframe when the
Before.
system was
Yeah.
going relative to the project.
What I suggest, if there's an issue at that time, bring it back to the board. You know, it is a control point we've used in the past, that's why I recommended that.
So in,
And
I mean, the
they can-
system's going in at some point.
They can
so
stake
why-
and flag the system as well. That's by law, they're supposed to stake and flag that system. So that should be done no matter what.
But there's no system when they're building the house.
No, I'm talking about when they put the system in, it has to be staked and flagged, and those stakes and flags have to stay up till the end of the construction, including final.
Sure, well, that makes sense.
You know, and that helps to some degree prevent travel over.
okay,
I'm not
so,
gonna say prevents it.
I don't know why we're restricting though, if he doesn't need if he has gravity, he doesn't need electrical to get to the septic.
it's to be consistent with repairs.
You
What
could,
have you, so.
could you think about doing it as like the later of either the electric or weather permitting?
I mean, it's my intent.
It might be
is- my
easier,
intent is to
just
put it in as soon
word-wise,
as I
is that
can.
you come back and, you know, if it's unusual
It's a
weather
different-
and it's still icy and 6 feet of snow on April 1st, or, you know, whatever, that we just revisit it.
We don't know
At that
what
point,
it could be,
Last
but I know-
March, it was like 70 degrees.
Uh,
Are you 80 degrees?
it's-
Today,
going,
yeah.
but, okay, but then, okay, so that would be the condition, I forgot where we got up to that. Take down the house, the time of reaching the point in construction, then the system has to start to begin, and then before proceeding beyond rough electrical, the system should be in and attached to the house. And the reasons for this would be due to the nature of the variances requested, that we really, one is more in the purview of the Conservation Commission, who approved it, the setback to wetlands, and that the on-site well was minimally affected, but no off-site wells, or no variances for that. And due to the restrictions for construction operations as established by having to meet requirements of the wetlands bylaws
In the unique topography.
and Ellen has to be the brains of keeping us organized. Any other?
Well, I was gonna suggest the
Any
plan
others?
approval can be after the waiver hearing, the variance hearing. And that's when I would add that the engineer be allowed to use the site area, Adobe for pond and groundwater information. I do have a question at that time about, as I said, I wasn't on the site, but they're pumping up to a septic tank and they meet Title V, but I don't know what's gonna build. That's, maybe they want to explain it now before the variance hearing's closed. We have that separate building with a pump going up to the septic tank for the new house. I don't know what's in there. Is it just a bathroom, is it a
Oh,
in-law?
this building here, yes. I don't show it on my color one, but I think yours was.
Yeah, you showed a pump there, Joe.
Yeah.
Just, here it is, here. Just don't want that
When
building.
I colored it, I must have.
That's okay.
So Dave, maybe you can talk about,
Yeah, so there's gonna be a bedroom in here and full bath. And then in the main house, there's gonna be, it's basically a master suite and a guest bedroom, which is really gonna serve as an office. There's really 4 rooms in each quadrant, 2 of which are gonna call bedrooms. One is a living room, and then, so, maybe 5 bedroom septic. So,
so the house is gonna be a 4-bedroom house
Yeah.
with a 1-bedroom.
4+1.
Right. So there's not gonna be a room count issue.
So what we're proposing here is similar to what we do for accessory structures turning into septic systems. I've done this several times, where we put in a basin, a pump basin, and we pump out prior to the septic tank tying it into the windows.
The reason I bring it up, Joe, I'm gonna have to look into it. The state allows pumps prior to septic tanks when it's less than 25% of the household flow. Does that mean within the boundaries of the house that exists, or does that mean for in-law houses? I'm going to have to check into that. It may have to go to a pump system or a septic tank. I can't tell you right now, but now that...
That would be less than 25%.
Oh, I agree with you there, but it's not within the same building. I'm going to have to check with the state on that. It's a separate house, basically, an in-law. And I'm not for sure. I know we did one for Dick Sabre years ago, and I believe he had a septic tank with a pump. I can check that one as well.
This is an existing structure, and on Western we did one where they wanted to do in-law over the garage. And there was nothing, I don't recall anything about a separate septic tank on that one. They just
They
tied
weren't
it in.
pumping, Chris, I don't believe, to the... See, the law, Title V requires that if you pump to the septic tank, you have to make sure you're under 25% of the household, the
we
household.
are.
So the definition of
Which we
household,
are here.
well, what's the definition of household is what I have to ask.
Well, you can
So
ask
you're
that.
saying you take each
Do you-
one, or you
yeah.
take,
Is it campus or is
I think
it
it's the whole
within-
facility.
And that's what we should check that, you know, because it will start, you know, one has to meet state code, so I have to make sure of that.
Well, let me put it this way. What if you had a basement unit, bathroom unit that was an in-home pump, you know, below the toilet? That would jettison the septic up to, I mean, this is not the same kind of idea. We'd allow
That's what
I
that.
he's
think the
saying.
only
The
difference
assumption
there is
is
it's
that
separate
it's a-
buildings.
It's a whole separate building.
I'm saying, what if it were in the basement? We wouldn't have a problem
Like
with
to make
that.
sure there's two requirements, that it doesn't pump more than 60 gallons per minute force, and that it, and this one I believe Jody said at 40. And the second thing is that it's not greater than 25% of the household.
Clearly, it's not
It's the
that.
definition of household. I don't know the answer to that.
No, it's
And
not.
I would have to ask Claire Golden at
20%
DEP.
or less.
I would ask
So
that
what-
they-
is there a workworkaround, let's say, worst case?
Yeah, they could
They
put a
view it as
septic
two
tank in the pump
households.
chamber.
Oh, I
The
see.
worst case is we'd have to put in 2 tanks
Oh, okay.
and just pump it,
Oh,
and
alright.
just pump it up to.
Okay.
The reason for it is it prevents clogs. Secondly, it prevents any bacterial action from being prevented. Your septic tank is supposed to be a settling tank, a very quiet environment. The minute you start pumping to it, prior to it, you create more agitation in the tank and less bacterial action occurs. So that's why the state's very strict on that. They have allowed for households to have a, and it's usually meant for a basement bathroom, to have a pump prior to a septic tank. That's going around a lot of household plumbing in most cases. And you have friction loss. And as long as it meets the 25% or less household flow and the 60 gallons per minute or less, usually it's allowed. I don't know about a separate building that's going to be used for a bedroom as an in-law. I have to check into it.
I don't know.
On behalf of the board.
Done
So
it for pool
you can
houses.
envision a way to address that.
Yeah,
if
worst
you need
case
to.
is like, that's
Yeah,
a
we
worst
should
case.
look into it.
That's a worst case. I have 2 neighbors that have in-law suites over the garages, and there's no one ever living in them, and they're never used. It's just something they want to do, so good for them. You know, this is kind of getting a little bit further than we need to, I think, my opinion.
Except we don't know how it's going to
I
be.
mean, we're
So
not
we
doing-
have to prepare for the possible use.
They're not a restaurant preparing food in this little building here. I mean, it's just
But I
an
think what Mark said
occasional
is an interesting technical piece in how it might, if you had a significant amount of volume,
Yeah.
affect the
Yeah.
performance of the net. So
Yeah.
that is a big deal.
It should be labor.
Yeah.
And it should be
We have
labor.
Yeah, we just put a bigger tank.
Yeah, okay. All right, so there's
Mark
something
made us
to
do
Little property there. I didn't make you, it's the requirements. I only follow the requirements. Make you.
But then you have to, I don't agree, because then you have to make sure this thing is exactly level and the flows are
No, it
correct.
doesn't eliminate the need for a pump. It changes whether it can be the simplified pumping over and whether there's another.
This is a pump basin that we're
settling tank,
pumping up
essentially.
in tiny.
That's what I think it should be. I think if you do this other workaround you guys are talking about, now you have 2 tanks and you gotta make sure everything's level. I understand
We'll
clearly,
still have the pump.
It goes into the distribution
I think
box,
that's
Chris. It doesn't,
you get more parts. You get more
It
parts and
doesn't
that
like
doesn't make sense.
anything non-gravity. It's the basic idea.
Oh,
So,
yes.
Well,
it has a pump
I
anyway.
think you're, getting away from the simple solution, which is right there on.
I would hope you'd be okay, but
No,
you can check.
I'm gonna have to-
Because everything I've been taught and gone over throughout the years with DP is they take the lot as one
That's
facility.
fine. If they do, the answer's there. Just want to check out the answer.
Right, so we're not trying to make it more complicated, just to give a heads up to the fact that it might have to have an adjustment pending some regulatory digging, interpretive digging. All right, so back, we still have to vote on whether we're allowing the different sequencing, and then this will be related to the plan code of this discussion. So, they suggested a possible motion to allow the change in sequencing due to all of those different conditions that we've been discussing about the property. And even though it's not exactly like some of the other precedents about change of sequencing, it has its own unique set of issues that, again, compromise perhaps.
Okay, motion on that?
Second, although I have to just say that I know that I'm always doing this, but I hate to make things more complicated, but I think it's important that we try to uphold regulations as much as we can, but I understand the circumstances, so I will second it.
So on this question, I'm not sure you're hearing me, that you're talking about the workaround. The workaround complicates this drawing. Therefore, now when you have more than one part, you have to make sure everything.
Yeah, so I want to make sure, unfortunately, I think I'm going to second up to the point of the installation time. I think we need to hope that you'll be able to do it at that time.
My intent is to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it prior to, kind of removing heavy equipment from the site. And I can't, if there's snow on the ground, I can't really do it.
Yeah.
So those will be the restricting factors for me. But I do want the project, want to keep marching forward.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it's possible, get the system in, because that
Right.
then enables us to do the exterior, get the ground graded, and then
Yeah.
get the landscaping done, because I do want to, deliver the home as quickly as we can.
Okay, so right now we're not voting anything about this issue.
Sure.
So would you
Right, so-
state that what we're voting on right now?
Are we ready to vote?
Sure.
Okay, all those in favor of the last variance in terms
Aye.
of
Can you
sequencing?
repeat
Say
what
aye.
was what I asked you? I'm
Oh,
sorry. I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on.
It's the two variances plus the sequencing whereby you're going to tear down the existing structure, get the house started, get a roof on it,
Yeah.
to the point where you get any lifts or hoists or lulls out of there, so you're not going to crush a system that you're going to build, and we just are voting on that.
Okay.
So I said aye.
And part of our vote includes the reasoning about the access, the restrictions
Right, no,
on
I understand.
access, and then the
Right,
variance.
which is why I'm seconding
variances
it.
requested, so. Okay, are we ready? All
I
those in
already did.
favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so, close the hearing, and for plan approval, do we need,
Well, I
garbage
can
grinder, do you
yeah.
research? Okay.
Well, what I'll do is just quote the section. It's 310 CMR 15.229, pumping to a septic tank. What it says is that system design specifying pumping of sewage to a septic tank may be approved by the approving authority for a single-family dwelling, provided the volume of sewage pumped is less than 25% of the design flow. The pump discharge pipe is connected to the building sewer, and they go on to the 60 gallons or force or less. Has to be a 1,500 gallon tank, and or use a grinder pump, which is less than 60 gallons per minute. So again, it's just that definition. Does that apply to a separate single-family home separated from the main single-family home? I don't know. This is the first time I've seen it. Joe seems to have a better handle on it, and I trust his opinion. He's the professional engineer here, but I think it's worth checking that section of Title
So we
V.
could,
It definitely is less than 25%, so.
Yeah, exactly.
If you just read it though, it needs to connect to the house pipe. You just read that.
The building pipe that leaves the house, that's what he's
So
You
the pipe
just-
going from the tank to the...
Just like he grew.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
It's a matter of, is it within the household?
Why don't we vote on it, and then if it, only if we learn that there's something.
Well, I was going to suggest that we approve the plan, subject to receipt of the garbage grinder deed restriction and confirmation that that doesn't need to be moved.
Yeah, in conservation, I was going to say to the board, conservation sent us an email just stating that we could approve the plan while they're in the process of the final issuance of the order of conditions. I did see one here,
We have that.
and I was surprised the same day the email was written, so
Yeah, we have
it was,
the
you know, so why don't you write the same day as we received it? Yeah, September 19th, and this is, maybe they haven't filed. Just so you know, I
He
just,
started that, the same day she sent it.
like I said, coming in the middle of this, but conservation should be noted, I agree, at least that they're satisfied to the plan board.
So you have signed it.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a motion to approve the plan subject to receipt of garbage grinder deed restriction and confirmation about the auxiliary structures pumping into the system? That's best worded.
Equipment for the management.
Yeah, we said that.
Okay, anything else?
Um,
And if I may, to be fair to the other applicant that was here, that when they do the as-built plan, they draw the water line on that as well. This one needs a lot of
Okay, and that when the as-built is submitted, that it has the water line? No.
Probably may change through the construction. So, and there'll be two of them actually, one to that other. It should note what that dwelling is going to be too. It just says building, so you know, they show the water line to both the in-law apartment as well as the members.
So as-built with water lines shown to the buildings on the property.
so you okay with it, Joe?
Yeah, we can do it.
All right, motion on that.
It'd be a little hard if we weren't tearing it down and rebuilding it, but we can do it.
All right.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, deed restriction, back in registered, and then just confirmation of the DEP.
About, right, as I could see, it's right, but it does talk about a single-family dwelling. I think the reason they're called in-law apartments is because it's a single family.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that
Family
accessory
unit.
building a single family dwelling.
Right.
I don't
I
know.
just read it, so I'm fine.
So given all that, you know, we should be good to get started within a week or so.
I would never answer a question like that. That's ended to the point.
We just approved it, right?
Let me explain if I could. They need a building permit, and that means it doesn't involve just the Board of Health. So to answer a question, I'm not being wise or anything, but to answer an open-ended
Well, no, he's
question.
gonna do the typical go to
It's going to have to go through the process. It's a matter of seeing if
I want
the
to start, I
starting
want to
is
submit,
completed.
I want to submit the application.
Yeah, he has to say to the other,
Well, can I finish? It depends on the room count. I have to review the building application. I mean, if you wish for me to do it, if you want, the other agent can do it. I don't care. But I do have to follow the process.
no, I'm saying practically speaking, when he goes to the next department, they're gonna ask him, well, is the Board of Health, did they pass this? And I think it's a simple yes.
As soon as we get that information, sure.
So
And
what
includes
information are you
the,
recommending?
Well, when the process, maybe, you don't, you know, I don't explain it to you. The process goes from this point on to check with DEP. Dave's going to submit a building permit. Joe's going to get me the groundwater where the house is. He's going to estimate it, I guess. Correct, Joe? You said we would do that?
Yeah, I thought you...
You're going to just send something in writing as the engineer saying...
Sure, if you want
If
that.
groundwater's ever found there, you know, you should at least put something in writing.
I can put something in writing,
That's fine.
sure.
You're the PD on the job, so that would be good for the record. And then once that's done, DEP agrees that, you know, it is considered okay, then you can be submitting a building application at the same time. What I was getting to is the building application has control form on it for several departments to file. So if you're asking to that point in 2 weeks, that's what I was trying to get to. I can't guarantee that because it depends on other people. What I can at least guarantee is if you have the building plans to us, the note taken on the plan that that is an in-law instead of just a building, and have both the design room counts of both the separate facility, the in-law, and the family structure, the main house, that gets reviewed as part of the building control form review. And we move from there. Your water supply, you're using the existing, correct? You're not going to test it or anything, so I hope you will, but you don't have to. So that's how it works. That's why I couldn't answer open-ended.
And the
2
deed
weeks.
restriction coming in and the confirmation the other would allow has to be released. So we can't do
Yeah, my
this
question
until
was more,
then.
when will I have an approved plan?
Yeah, we just approved it with those
I
conditions.
thought you meant the approval to start
No,
building.
that's what he was asking. and that's
So
what
it's
I
not
was
the approval
responding
to start building, that was
I'm
the
just kind of
question.
looking for a stamped plan, package.
I think once Joe gets this information on the ground, as well as the DEP,
Right.
those 3 things you can do tomorrow. I've seen people do it in 1 day. It's up to
I'll do it
you.
one day.
Maybe it was you, so it's up to you. If you can do it in 1 day,
So Mark, just
More
a
power.
simple letter estimating groundwater.
how you determine groundwater for the site. And
Well, that's on the plan.
Yeah, but as I said, it's not in the valley. It's an off-work ground valley. It starts a precedent.
So you need me to expand
Based on
on
the
the groundwater that we just approved?
Based on the ground. I think you can easily do that, base it on the pond. and
I thought we already did it, but,
Well, if you had already an agreement to
I
it.
mean, it had soil evaluator forms and it was witnessed, right?
Without the adjustment, did you already have
The
confirmation?
adjustment.
Was that confirmed in the plan review?
Didn't we just confirm it?
Well, I suggested that you utilize
The plans,
the
how can the plan be approved if we still have a question about groundwater?
You had verified, Joe, that you could base it on the pond and the wetland.
I thought we were talking about groundwater at the building location.
I was talking about the site area where you determined if you're an off-work
Because you said we
ground.
needed a test pit where the house was being built.
Well, unless, again, I look at it this way. I look at it that the Norfolk grounds are valid. You're on a hillside for the system. If you want to use that, it doesn't correlate, and I noted right here at the meeting that FERT is not the method to use right now because of the drought. Groundwater adjustments.
See, now I have to say, I assume that we were talking
I
about
was
wetlands
confused.
in the pond.
That's what I thought.
Confirming.
Just base it on that.
All right,
Oh,
let's
so you want to
confirming.
see that reflected on the
just write it on there.
plan?
I mean, we already talked about this a half hour ago. Just put it on there and we're good. I mean, there's a farm
So
pond right
just-
next to
Yeah,
it.
that's,
You got
that's
Beacon
what
Hill, you're gonna take 4 feet off, you're gonna grade it, so
I agree. Use farm
we're
pond.
not gonna find water. It's-
Okay.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
So I would
Probably be
say, I
greater.
could see your having it on the plan, it will strengthen the plan. Is that difficult to modify?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very
Sounds
much.
good.
Thanks.
All right, okay. We have continuation of our hearing. Minutes. So, it is 8:38, and we have the continuation of the public hearing on proposed regulations changes.
Is there other material besides regulation changes that we're covering at these meetings?
Well, that's a scheduled appointment, so we're going to do that because we're starting a little late. So, we have agenda item discussion really, so we don't have a lot of other items after this. Oh, all right. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Would that be good?
That'd be great.
Okay, sorry about that. 5-minute recess.
4 minutes, if you want.
Okay, 4 minutes.
Great.
Okay, and the Board of Health meeting of October 19th, 2016 is back in session, and we're continuing our public hearing on proposed regulations changes. Does anyone have a preference for which order we look at the things that we have reviewed over several meetings prior to this? We have kind of basically housing for the elderly change, definition of semi-public water supply, definition of maximum contaminant level goal.
This came in today's packet.
No, this is from the past items.
Can I get a copy of that, please? Thank you.
Here you go. Did you need a copy? Looks like it. Okay.
Okay, great. Can I keep this? Thank you.
We have the semi-public water supply, and then we have testing perchlorate prohibition. So the one we discussed at the last meeting was about the current action level for volatile organic compounds, VOCs. I don't know if you want to pick up on that one, since that's the one that we were most recently discussing, in case it's fresher on everyone's minds, and see. And I've done a little bit of checking since then on that, but
So we're talking about 7.1. Which one are you referring to?
17.3.
17. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have if we pick that one up again and just try to maybe come to something one way or the other? I think it's on the third page of that. Over here? This one. So, and then I had proposed a variation on that the last time as well. But I did contact Drew Smythe, who is the consultant who is working for both the town of Framingham and for Sherborn on the general chemical issue. And I asked whether the 0 level that we have within Sherborn is critical to any of the DEP's decisions regarding general chemical. He didn't think that they had been taking it into consideration to date, that they've been going off of state regulations. However, I'll also say that I thought about what you were talking about last time about our duty, do we have a duty to be precautionary about what we're looking at for folks? And so I thought about that some more, and the MCLG, which is the maximum contaminant level goal, which is the level that EPA sets for chemicals that is strictly based on health effects and doesn't take into consideration technologies available or costs and or other factors. And then I had also an interesting experience. A client had received results about their public water supply, and they had a hit on a volatile organic chemical, and it was at less than 1/100th of the drinking water standard. And what they were required to do was to go from triennial sampling to quarterly sampling to track that. So it was a tracking, it wasn't to do anything else, but it was a keep on top of what's happening there. And I thought what I like about somehow using the goal or 0, either way, is rather than a deed recording, is to have the testing be required. How we enforce that is still a bit of a sticky issue, and I tried to get some input from town council, and they haven't replied yet on what our tools might be to enforce that. But that, to me, the testing was addressing the issue more directly and saying that if there's a chance that it might be the leading edge of something that's on the increase, is that it needs to be monitored. so that people know if at some point they're going to be drinking something dangerous, which a deed recording doesn't do. That's sort of a one-time, it happens and it's out there, and it might warn future purchasers of the property, but it's not the same as someone addressing testing for some period of time. And also what the Mass DEP does, Department of Environmental Protection, is they will review after increased testing has been performed, usually for about a 3-year period. Then they'll revisit the issue and say, how did the testing go over that period of time? Was it on the rise? Did it decline? Did it turn out to be an anomaly? Whatever the case might be, and then they might adjust the testing after that. So right now, I'm leaning to saying either we pick something regarding the MCLG and a percentage, or maybe 0, and then require not a whole house treatment system unless, perhaps unless drinking water quality standards in Massachusetts are exceeded, but rather in between, something in between 0 and a standard, we require monitoring.
I'm worried about enforcement. It is private property. These wells are almost always going to be private property. And the only other thing that I thought it was a very important point was when the agent, Mr. Mascoop, said that it would potentially hurt our negotiating power with General Chemical. So I personally don't know enough to question that, but I respect that he knows more than I. And so I would be very interested to get that opinion that you, before a change is made, because obviously it would be, this is much more reasonable. And so I would like to be able to support it. But I wouldn't want to do anything that we would regret later if there's any detrimental effect on our ability to negotiate the best interests of the town. Because certainly right now we know that the leading edge of the plume is here already. It's not even heading towards us. So the question is, what do we do?
Okay.
And so that's my hesitation. And then the other thing is that if we're going to, it's possible that we need to have a threshold at which a deed recording is necessary. Because although it is, an individual homeowner doesn't want their property value to go down, I think we have an obligation to the future, to the drinking water supply for everyone, not just one person, and really that's what we're talking about. We really should not be, I'm sorry, and I hope that doesn't happen, and I wouldn't want that to be the case, but really there has to be a protection in place to warn someone or to provide for appropriate action, and I think people would appreciate it if they know.
Okay,
And
so go.
so I think if we monitor,
Mhm.
we might need to have a period after which it's required, because I don't think it's related to whether we still should be monitoring, but if it's, year after year after year, at some point, it might need to be
Well, I
documented.
could
I
see
don't
the-
really know. I mean, I'm just concerned about the enforcement and how we protect future people, or even abutters.
Right, and what I had asked town council about were enforcement mechanisms, like
Yeah.
if the results of testing were not submitted to our office on the schedule that they should be, then what step could we take? And what I specifically asked is, can we make a deed recording on someone else's property? Which I don't know that we can, but there might be a lien option or something. It's outside my field, but I thought that would be helpful to know so that we'd have the backup. On the deed recording front, I think if we had a trigger for whole house treatment system, that should be deed recorded. It's like a garbage no garbage
The other
grinder
thing that-
issue because it's talking about a new feature in the house. It's not a standard feature, and someone should certainly know that that
The other
exists
thing
and is
that
required.
might be able to avoid a deed restriction would be a requirement that at the time of real estate transaction, notification is given, which doesn't, of past testing, it might need to be required so that it doesn't take the actions of a future homeowner, and then you can keep it off the deed, but not have to worry that somebody later on might not know. I don't know, does it require deed restriction for a system of notification? A requirement of notification
Of which notification?
of past
Right.
testing results, of the need for testing and the results of monitoring? I mean, it's,
Right, there would be some communication needed, so a new owner would be aware of that.
you could bypass the deed by simply requiring notification to a future buyer, then they can make their own decision. I mean, I think that's the issue. I think the issue is how do we protect people
Mhm.
who might, different people will react differently to risk thresholds or whatever, and I feel like people can do what they want. It's not, I don't want to be involved with telling people what they have to do unless, but I'd like to feel comfortable that people truly know and don't have to take an extra step of their own initiative, which later on they could look back and say, I didn't know. If I had known, I would have, that's just so hard. So how can we just be sure that everyone's on the same page? And so I'm just throwing that out there.
Mhm. Okay. All right, and the one other thing you brought up about Agent Mascoop was talking about the zero tolerance and its negotiating position perhaps with General Chemical, and that's why I had contacted Drew Smythe, and Ethan Mascoop and Drew Smythe have worked closely together for years. So I spoke to Drew, said that he doesn't believe the DEP is using it now, and I relayed this to Ethan Mascoop to discuss that, and he could see that point. And I have to say I'm reluctant to say if it is something that is important for us in terms of our desire. I mean, just our whole discussion now is about the desire to go beyond any kind of state standard approach to the VOC issue. So we have that interest. And do we want to change that, and in what ways? So in terms of the town's commitment to water quality. However, I still think we could again either have a zero tolerance but not automatically requiring treatment, because the engineering side of me still has trouble with requiring a treatment system of who knows what efficacy at very low levels
Yeah.
to even address very low levels. And
No, but I
to
think
make
that
that
this
requirement,
is
that's the part I have harder time with, but
Mhm.
some sort of notification or tracking of that thereafter to ensure that it's not on a bad path, which I think is reflected in what I just saw in the DEP's notice to this other
Yeah.
public water supply, which I found interesting because of that huge difference, the percentage at which it triggered. It really was, everything else on the report was non-detect except for one item. And that triggered a significant increase in the frequency of testing. So I think that reflects some of the same concerns that we have about detections.
How effective are the treatment? Are you able to comment on?
Some are not for some chemicals it's very difficult to treat, and it's one treatment system may not necessarily treat all, and if you had one system that treats all, then you are taking everything out of your water, and that's not healthy to drink. Maybe you don't want demineralized water. So that's the part
Because
where
I
I'm
also
not
don't
so
think we
keen.
should
And I'm
require
not
something.
keen on requiring, I want people to understand what they're drinking, but I'm not sure I want to require that they do something radically different than what state-established drinking water quality levels are.
Well, if it's not effective, then I don't think we should be requiring it.
I mean, we
So I'm
can't know,
interested
some
in
things
knowing
are more easily removed
The
than others,
efficacy
but
of, if we're accomplishing our goal, then okay, great. But if you require something that's costly and it doesn't actually accomplish the goal, then I'm not sure it's necessary. But if it's extremely, inexpensive and it works really well, that's a completely different conversation.
and it's too complicated for us to figure that out. And that's part of also why the EPA has those two levels. They have a goal that's strictly health-based, and then they have something that takes into consideration what someone could even implement to address it. So again, trigger for notification if we do something either at zero or based off of the MCLGs.
Well,
And
I think that we should stay
to
with
me, that
health-based
gets to the
decision-making because that's our
duty.
that's what we're supposed to be doing. And maybe it will be more reasonable, but I don't know. That's why I'm asking you to.
So, okay. Any thoughts about?
Well, I mean, Mark, VOCs aren't supposed to be in drinking water.
Correct. If it's private drinking water, you're drilling into the ledge. That water is usually of pristine nature without any volatiles. If there's volatiles, you have to question where they came from.
Okay, so just getting on some of the basic points. Some of the VOCs, like a toluene, can contain 15% benzene, which obviously can cause liver cancer. Toluene itself can be a central nervous system depressant, cause auditory damage in the mid-frequencies, liver and kidney function issues, multiple routes of exposure, inhalation of the vapors through hot shower or what have you, skin penetration
Yeah.
is minor, but it's still there. So you're dealing with something that shouldn't be there, has multiple routes of entry into the body, multiple potential contaminants on top of an agent like toluene, which has 15% benzene, and multiple organ effects, possibly. So, I think we've generated an interesting discussion. Personally, I think it clearly ties into the general chemical discussion because state and federal agencies will take that into account when they look at sites for cleanup, for pressuring potential responsible parties to do more or hold more in reserve for potential cleanup, or whether something even gets listed as a Superfund site for federal funds. So I do think that is at play here. So I would echo Rebecca's concerns on. And another point I'd make is that was brought up and talked about a bit at the last time we talked about this was basically if you come off zero, what's the point you're going to, and what's your rationale or proof for rationale to going to something else. And we established that we would ignore kind of the federal drinking water standards and look just at the state. I think that was a good point. I think by having the LSPs who are in here, Mike Stiller and Lisa Campy, that's very helpful. So any discussion we have, we absolutely need those types of folks here. So interesting discussion. I'm just not sure I'm at a point where I'm ready to move on this and vote something else from what's been in place for decades at this point. So that's my
Would the individual that you spoke with be willing to give us something in writing? Probably not.
I mean, I don't know, what do you mean give it in writing? Just saying
It
that.
probably
it's
then
not
we
that-
wouldn't be able to
You can't say
that
it for
anyway.
DEP.
Right, yeah,
So
right.
we can only, we
Yeah.
talked about what he's seen them do over the years.
Right.
It's never out loud. But I
Right.
believe there's gotta be, I hope there's some influence. It's our town and it's the regulations that we have. So I hear, okay, so moving off of zero is not as appealing. The question is, if someone finds something, anything above zero, do we still want to automatically require a whole house treatment system as then the next step?
We do allow them to, if I may,
Yeah.
to do consecutive testing.
Right, I'm assuming that doesn't work out.
Well, okay, that's been very limited, maybe to 1% of the cases. It
Right.
usually means there's something in the source that they're drawing from. That in turn would resolve, well, it's time for a de-recording and treatment versus, and then testing after to make sure the treatment's keeping it down to zero tolerance. But like I said, it's a small percentage.
I understand,
I don't know if it just helped or hurt with that, but that's the procedure.
No, I mean, we don't know the problems, we don't know what's happening, so that's the problem.
right. Again, I think people could voluntarily install it and try it out if they wanted to, but I just have a hard time requiring something that I'm not so sure is even attainable. It's the part I have trouble with.
And if I may, Darrell, we try to get them to, if it's erroneous or introduced, we try to get them to.
No, I understand that that's.
The bacteria, the cleaning of the filter. We
Right.
don't want to see filters if we don't have to have them. So this allows, some people say, well, we'll put one in anyways, and I typically tell them there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of backwash. If you don't need it, don't just test your water yearly. So, just put it aside.
Right, and some things just a filter alone might not do. But that's because I'm often dealing with industries who have to, for their processing that they're doing, achieve a certain level of water quality. What a nightmare every time you have to try and evaluate reverse osmosis and all sorts of other technologies to see if it's going to work with your particular water chemistry. Not easy. Not easy. And whatever the vendor is selling, that vendor will claim up and down that, of course, this is the absolute perfect system. But I've gone to enough conferences and discussions where unless you get someone who's looking at all the options together and carefully analyzing the water, it's, there's a lot of poor performance of systems out there. So that's, so I don't have trouble saying it's still, if you're not comfortable going to something that's, again, based off of some percent of the MCLG or something like that, it stays at zero, I do have trouble with still requiring that automatic leap to treatment. And then the question becomes, all right, so then what would be the trigger for treatment? And I will peg that to a drinking water standard. Probably be the approach I would look at. Or the MCLG is the alternate approach. Or something like 95% or something, you don't want to wait until it completely trips over.
Right,
But with
that's-
that identification at anything above zero, and then the question is it just a de-recording, which is simpler?
Yeah, I mean, probably it's a
Mechanism-wise,
de-recording
it's
because it
simpler
doesn't
to do,
require
but it
monitoring.
doesn't get to.
Again, of course.
The question is, do we force people to test and inform themselves?
I would be in favor of requiring a deed recording after a series of consecutive testing. Or, if the testing isn't done, requiring it. I don't know how the interval testing, I would follow your lead on that. Personally, I would be more on the conservative side as far as I would rather have a system that triggers attention and notification. Of course, I I think that notification is a good thing, not going to create more work for any of us. And allowing, then people can do whatever they want, but I think there has to be some way for information to be communicated, and I don't know what the best way to do that is. Maybe that's the reason that deed recordings were used in the original regs.
Might be least administrative overhead.
Yeah. And the most reliable way to get information passed.
Subsequent residents. So we have.
Questions?
Yeah, I just want to keep notes. So we have kind of, I guess, three main areas. There's the trigger level, and just what is it? And then there's the notification question. We have testing, and then we have treatment technologies. Right? Kind of the main areas. So, okay, yeah.
I'll try to be concise. So my whole focus is worrying about things that are very transiently introduced during the process of digging a well or disinfecting a well that can then mess things up if you have rules that just don't understand that, right? We're dealing with rules that were written a long time ago, but that was when testing was way less sensitive. And so we have the potential of being able to detect things that are 1,000 times below the NCLG, which is the level at which there's no known or detect or anticipated risk to health with a reasonable margin of error, right? So these are really potentially tiny things that can be detected. So is there a way of making your process so that it allows people to get through the possibility that you have transiently introduced something without completely messing up, the sale of the house that's coming up in 2 weeks, and having to flush and retest in order to get the house sold. I don't think that's protecting anybody's health if you're doing that.
I think that's why we were talking about trying to have a sequence of testing before something is recorded because of that risk. And but I guess we're just sort of discussing what are the practicalities of it. And
Understood.
And also, most of what's going to be happening is when we're long gone, and so other people are going to. So what's the best way to approach it? And so thank you for your point, because I think that's one of the things we have to figure out.
And my two concrete questions are you still considering the idea of requiring the turnover of a house? I think that was entertained before, or that's it.
I personally am in favor of that. I can only speak for myself, because I think it simplifies a few things, because it.
What are you in favor of? I didn't.
Oh, sorry. Requiring notification at the time of a real estate transaction.
Or testing, right?
Right. Or whatever. Some kind of information gathering or transfer of information, so that, because I think it's too sort of nebulous when the person needs to go into the file in the Board of Health office and look for something that was done 10 years ago, and I don't know.
So you're not really considering it as
No.
required testing, because that's not.
Yeah, it wasn't at all part of the original.
Yeah.
We can discuss that.
I
But
think that's the part of the deed recording debate.
But it is an option for doing better than just having a deed recording that happened 20 years ago. In other words, you're at least checking up on things from time to time. So I would make it. And then my other question, I'll turn it back to you, is are you considering something different for disinfection byproducts, which are kind of different from benzene?
such as, what are you
chlorine.
thinking of?
Right? That's in public water supplies all the time.
Yeah.
And that's something that you put into your well when you're digging the well and disinfecting it. And then it shows up as chloroform, I believe.
Right, and this goes back to what Mark was referring to of the provision that's already there for retesting and just having 2 sequential clean results, which would demonstrate that that has been.
Right, but if
Purge
clean
from
has
the
to be
system.
0, and if you have to do it within 2 weeks because you've got a sale coming up, I have a friend who this happened to, and it cost him thousands and thousands of dollars, and, pumping in a drought, so.
Right.
It was
And
Charlie
so
Wil-
I
Charlie-
see
Charlie
that-
Wil- It's Charlie Williams that Allison's referring to. What happened was they needed to deepen their well, and so they deepened the well. In the process, they put a drill that had petroleum lubricants on it. They introduced toluene, and it tested positive for toluene. They flushed. I mean, I think Charlie had to test that well 4 or 5 times. And with minute amounts of toluene. I mean, it just became this nightmare for Charlie. And it just seems like it's not protecting anyone to put people through that. The expense and the angst and all of that, it's not right. Particularly for amounts of toluene that are found in bottled water. I mean, you can go down to the Citgo station and buy a bottle of water that has more toluene in it than Charlie Williams had in his well. And yet you made him test over and over and over again at, $400 a pop. And I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense.
Well, you have heard us discussing this for hours and hours, so we're looking at it. Now, the things that get more complicated is, which it would have been nice to have some input on what our enforcement abilities are. So if you want to give more time for some natural flushing ideas to go on, which is our concept, but could, or if it's truly something introduced at a low level, and folks are doing just periodic testing until they seem to get to the point where maybe then they can do the 2 consecutive tests or whatever, or just some new testing regime, and then you'd switch over to, at the end of that period, a different course of action based on did it clean up or did it not. So how can we make sure people continue to do the testing that they need to do so that we can get to that point of then picking the new path, based on some series of test results. It's not easy for us to do that. So that's the piece that I do think is that probably when this regulation was crafted before, it is done very simply. Again, it was done in a different era, so we're trying to address the era change, but at the same time the era change, look at some other things. But then how can we guarantee that what would need to be done gets done? And so,
Charlie Williams' problem would have been fixed though if I had something that was just a hair higher than 0, right? Because, and I don't think there's any legitimate argument that 1 microgram is a health problem, because the EPA has the MCLG.
well,
and
the MCLG is 0 for something. So again,
Yeah,
I don't
but not-
think you
not
can
for
make
something.
that a blanket, just like maybe 0 isn't the right blanket
Yeah.
statement, neither is something higher than 0 the right blanket statement. So
I don't think as well as strictly involves issue with other.
okay.
Well, what happened was with all the testing, they introduced bacteria, and then they had a problem with bacteria instead of toluene. I mean, they went in these crazy circles with the testing, and they were all introduced. There was no fundamental problem with the well or with the water. It was the process.
Which
was
is
in
then unfortunate that
a terrible
that
loop.
happened with the
Yeah.
procedures that were employed by whoever was doing the work for them. So a whole other sticky topic too is because we don't have, I don't know that we have the control over them or to tell people not to use certain drillers. 'Cause certainly in my profession, there are some among my clients that I would never recommend
then
that
they-
they use
then they-
because these kinds of problems come up over and over
And
again.
then they put chlorine in to get rid of the bacteria, and then the chloroform shows up. The same chloroform, by the way, in the same amounts that's in Ashland drinking water and Natick drinking water and all these other drinking waters. And then they had to go back and flush to get rid of the chloroform, which was introduced by disinfecting. I mean, it was this, it was
And this is
crazy.
going back to, right, some
Which is
mixed
one of the
issues.
reasons that we're so lucky that we don't. I mean, on one hand, we're kind of lucky. It's really inconvenient to have to do all this stuff, but we're so lucky we don't have a water supply that has to be treated like that. You know, so I mean, we're kind of lucky because once those externally introduced factors are eliminated, for the most part, we actually have really nice water to drink. So it's it's complicated because I think sometimes it's a real inconvenience, but on the other hand, we're kind of lucky.
Are we going to not allow Ashland water to be used in a development out in the line because it's got a volatile organic in it every day?
But then it's not regulated by us because it's not a private water supply. So-
Yeah. Luckily, it
So
won't
that
be
would
our,
be
But do
It
we
won't
be our
care about
problem.
the risk?
Well, if we're not responsible for it, it's not that we don't care, but it's that it's not really our responsibility. So we have to.
Not our authority.
Our opinions are not that relevant.
Okay, so,
Excuse me.
I mean, I think at your last public hearing on this, you had a crowd of 40 or 50 people, including, as Chris said, a couple of LSPs and a lot of scientific people. And what I heard that night was a consensus that developed in the room among the people with expertise, including you all. And I think that's what you're suggesting tonight. You're going kind of back to that conversation where it was said that the deed recording doesn't make any sense. It's a forever thing. It's a taking in many ways to ask
no,
somebody.
but
to
you
put
can
it
also
down.
subsequently put in another recording that
But
changes
it's
that
there.
interpretation, so.
Well, but it's, under the current law, it's there forever. There's no way to get rid of it. It's forever. And so I heard a consensus in the room among the LSPs and among you folks and among the experts that it made sense to do something like have a percentage of the MCLG, and below, if the test came in below 50%, pick a number, whatever, below that, then it's not a problem. If it comes in above that, then you're required to come back and test. And if you get to the level of the DEP, then you have to put in a whole new system. That made sense, and that was the consensus of the very large group of people who came out that night to have that conversation. Unfortunately, we're now in the third public hearing, and there's nobody here because they got tired. They came to 2 public hearings, and by the third one, they weren't up for it anymore.
Well, and that's okay, because even though, I don't know, it's quite that many people, but even though they were here and we got a lot of good input, the board is representing then, I don't know how many times that number, 100 times that number of people for townwide. And I'm not sure that the consensus was, I don't know that there may have been certain ideas expressed a number of times by a number of people. I don't know that the consensus was up within the board, nor necessarily, complete agreement within the audience either. So
The compelling argument for me was that one of the experts in the room referred to our important problem, potentially increasing problem with the general chemical situation. And so that was the thing that made me the most concerned, because I want to be reasonable, but I also don't want to undermine our effectiveness in that regard. And so I was interested in hearing more. So I thought that was helpful for you to give us some follow-up. Anyway, that's That was another expert in the room.
I personally think after 3 public hearings, it would be nice to at least put forward something and take a vote.
Mhm.
If it fails, it fails. But I'd like to see a vote after 3 public hearings on this issue.
I think we'd all like to come to some sort of resolution. I'm trying to listen to what everybody, both in the past, has been saying out in public, and also what the board members are expressing about concerns. And people have different perceptions on risk, and I think that's what we're hearing here is, where is it that we want to take the risks and not take the risks with public health? And then throw in the administrative nature of it and how to enforce it. It's always the more difficult part, really, for me. So on trigger level, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that you're inclined to say, we have this 0, we don't have any, you're not seeing as strong a reason to change from the general concern of anything above 0. So 0 is a good starting point for some sort of action. Am I characterizing what you've said
No, I
accurately?
think speak for yourself, and I'll just make the comments that I make, and we'll leave it at that.
Except, I guess I have to say, I'm trying to look at what do we have now, and are there modifications to what we, have been a lot as we've been talking, potential modifications to what we have. Is there anything that we would get to that would meet public health needs, but perhaps be more practical for implementation?
Well, I think you need to vet out some of these questions I've had, which is, how do you have scientific basis for doing anything except a state level? I guess is what I keep bringing up as a point. Once you go down this road and open this up, I think I have to hear more that it would be supportable and defendable. And I'm nowhere near that point. So, I don't need you to try to summarize my thoughts, because my thoughts are malleable and evolving. I'm just saying I'm asking a lot more questions than coming up with answers at this point, as I have for the last couple of hearings on this. And I'm not prepared to move on anything that doesn't have answers to the unintended consequences that we're trying to figure out as well, especially with a very real situation on the Framingham side of town.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I kind of feel the same way. I agree that I learned a lot, and I appreciated the comments of the LSPs who were in the room. And I think that the real issue is the enforcement part, because if we make things more complicated, the enforcement part is going to be our problem. I'd love to not have that be the case, but it has to be. And so, have you heard from our town council about that?
I put the question out there, but I have not heard back.
Is there a mechanism by which we might be able to ask her thoughts, or ask again, or I don't know? Do we need to ask this?
have to ask
The
again.
selectmen have, I think it's actually great that the selectmen have put so much time and effort into addressing the general chemical thing, and I think that that's, I think it's very helpful when more than one board is working together to solve a problem. I don't think they know that we very much about what we've done, but I think it's great what they've done, and I know what they've done because I heard them talk about it, which is, so maybe they would be willing to support us in asking the council to weigh in on that. Have we, maybe we should communicate with them and ask if they can help us. I don't know.
I'm sure I copied them on my question.
Okay.
So, or the town administrator. So,
everybody cares. Obviously, the people who are being affected more than others probably care at the moment more. But everyone shares the concern about the risk, and so I think it would be valuable to get some input on that. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for that. And we
Okay,
did try, but we don't
what-
have the information.
Okay, are you talking specifically about General Chemical or?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because it would affect that. But I appreciate what the
okay.
LS.
Well, I did go to the
the
consultant
right, yeah.
that the
Right.
selectmen have hired to help the town evaluate.
okay.
I mean, that's who Drew Smike is.
Okay, I didn't
He
know that
is-
he was the
Oh,
consultant.
he is the
they hired.
consultant.
Oh, that's great.
Who has been working on General Chemical for many years for
Right.
Framingham. So he is the most technically
Okay, well, that's
knowledgeable
good.
person. And then Ethan as well, Ethan Master. So on more the side of identifying issues and advocating for Framingham and what they've been looking at over the years. So the two of them, between the two of them, and then Carol Boyce, if I'm saying her name right, would be the other person who's
But the
also
other
heavily
thing that-
engaged. But Drew is the technical lead.
But the other thing about I thought that I heard you say that you were asking the town council about enforcement.
Yes, about our ability, like if we say that monitoring is what we really like people to do, so they are tracking what they're drinking.
Yeah. So we're not putting unreasonable demands on the
Right,
homeowners.
rather than immediately going to treatment, is that they track what's happening with the water so that then we can receive results and identify either when the next level is needed, such as treatment, or whether, oh gee, it was something transitory and it's gone. So,
Okay, so
but
then
then
in
what do
the
we do in the
audience-
event that someone just never turns in the results?
Well, I mean, in
We
the
have some
audience,
control at the beginning when people are installing a well. Too bad your well's not approved, you don't get a certificate of occupancy, there is a hammer there.
but that's
But
what
once
building-
you've approved it and they're living there and they're not testing,
Yeah.
then it's not achieving the goals that we set out.
Because there was a very clear message from the audience that people didn't want to have that information documented. And there was a very clear message that at least one person said there's no way they were going to ever test. They wouldn't do it if it's their private property and they wouldn't want to do that. So we, the Board of Health, are put into this position, this awkward position of how do we say that we're looking out for the needs of the abutters or whatever, who else we're supposedly working to represent, if we don't have any leverage. And so I think that's the part that I'd like to hear what the town council says. If the town council says it's not possible, there's no way you can require that for private property, then I don't think that we can, I think we need to keep it as a deed recording and a recommendation for monitoring. But if it's realistic and there's some, I don't know, ability to say, okay, you're required to do this, then we should change it and say, okay, at zero, after, above zero, then you monitor, and above 25% of the MCLG, then the next thing happens, and then at some other point, a deed recording happens. And that would be something that I might feel comfortable with, because I think it's important to be reasonable, I think it's important to be practical. But I don't, if the town council says, dream on, then, we need to be practical. I mean, I don't give, there are reasons that people give, an IM shot to people with syphilis, because they're just not going to take their antibiotics every 4 hours. And that's just part of being effective at what you're doing. So I'm sorry to make it complicated and to drag it out, but
No, and that's why I contacted town council, because it is a
Yeah.
missing piece. And so we're gonna have to insist that we get some sort of feedback on that, so that.
I mean, I can't imagine that.
And I know that some years ago, there was
Support that.
something set up about liens and powers of one of the offices in town to put liens on properties as related to fine collection. I have a vague recollection, although it was not, I don't know that it's been used, but I remember many years ago.
Public water is a little different, where if there are issues and you're not paying attention, permits usually are involved. Where private is a different form of administration.
Sure is.
Right.
And usually the permit is on a periodic basis, so that you have, like a food permit annually, tobacco permit annually. So that has a built-in review. So to answer your question, I don't have a motion, I don't have a second, because but I do have a lot of questions that remain, so that's where I am with it.
Can I ask a question, Daryl?
Yeah.
Is there a state code for, does DEP or anyone would have a code for inspection? An example is I think they're promulgating a new fire code now that if you sell your house, you have to install brand new smoke detectors on sale, because they find that they're supposed to be replaced every 10 years and no one replaces them, so they're now proposing that.
I think it's on every floor.
Anytime you sell your house, well, you have to replace the, if they say they're 3 years old and they're good for 10 years. It hasn't been passed yet, but they're proposing one where you have to put brand new ones in at sale, just because they figure they don't ever get replaced. So is there any kind of, they have the advantage that it's a state fire code. So there's no really DEP, because there's so few towns that have private water
DEP has
supplies.
completely pushed private water supply into the hands of Board South.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But it's also a question of who would pay for the test, whether it would be the buyer or the seller. I mean, I tested my well, but I was just doing, a home inspection, and that was one of the things I did as part of it. That was
Right,
fine.
my personal preference is that it should be the buyer. I don't see it as being a
But in
seller
a way, you can't have
issue, but
jurisdiction over them because they don't even live in town at the time. You don't have any ability to influence them.
yeah, I guess then the requirement could be that I guess if the person wants to sell the home, they should let the buyer test.
Well, what they do is, so the fire department, and Bob, I think you know more than I do, but they inspect the smoke
Considering
detectors.
it now,
The fire department inspects smoke detectors, and they inspect, I believe, your fuel oil tank.
The what?
Your fuel oil tank.
Fuel what?
Oil
Oil
tank.
If you have furnace with powered by fuel oil, they inspect the tank.
Yeah, and the line that runs.
Right. So,
tank to
so they
furnace.
do inspections of some things, but I don't know how you can get water to be. Those are required of a seller, but I think it's because of Chris? Is it? We're talking about how you could cause a water inspection to be done at the time of sale of the house.
It's difficult. The banks used to require it, now it goes to care.
Yeah.
Okay. So there might be something to be done on that front, except we don't have enough information on that. Changing the standard, I'm going to guess is a no. We have something that somewhat works. I want to see what we have if we make an incremental change along the lines of what we're looking at, because although if we, I don't want to rush it, and certainly states take years to make these kinds of decisions on regulatory changes with staff devoted to the issue, so it's not as if it's easy. But at the same time, if we're causing troubles in the meantime that don't have to be, and that, again, I go back to the treatment. It's treating for anything above 0, I just see it's, I don't know. But that is definitely my bias, because I have to deal with that sort of thing. And
the, your comment about demineralizing water is relevant. The effectiveness, just saying that it might not be desirable.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, treatment, whole house treatment systems.
Is,
It's relevant that there might be health risks associated with removing all the iron. So I'm interested in how effective it is at accomplishing the goal and how cost effective it is to require it, unless if there's no other option that works. If somebody has a endangering level, then okay, then it's worth the benefit to eliminate the endangering level, and maybe that's the risk that goes along with it. But
Right.
so here I am doing exactly, just throwing up more questions and making it more things to discuss, so I apologize.
So, we are talking about 17.3 and G. So if I just look at what we have now, which is far simpler than the initial write-up of an alternate, and look at it, it reads, if any concentration of volatile organics is detected, or the sodium concentration is greater than 28 milligrams per liter, a document shall be attached to the deed and recorded in the South Middlesex Registry of Deeds, which identifies the chemicals, their concentrations, and health effects. I actually don't like, before I move on to the last sentence, I don't like "and health effects" because our understanding of health effects is changing all the time. So to me, to lock something into a deed and assume that someone is capable of extracting all possible information and how you compare and across toxicological studies and all the rest, to me, I would want to strike that and leave it at, and I believe I had struck it here, but identifies the chemicals and their concentrations, and that would be it. And then the last sentence is, a whole house treatment system for the removal of volatile organics shall be installed if they are detected. And I also really don't like that. I think that should be a requirement more akin to either the MCLG or the MCL with the state, and that would be more consistent with what's being done elsewhere. And then what we have is just the notification and the triggering about either the detection or if someday we pick something else, but maybe that's not something that we can resolve now. But I don't know if there's any kind of improvement we can make to this. And then in terms of the others, picking deed recording versus, again, what I like is some sort of ongoing testing so that people's health really is protected. They don't just do a deed recording that they're not happy about doing, but they do it and then on to something else and not really tracking what goes on. I've certainly heard the arguments from people that, but it's your private water supply, so it's your choice, but in any case. So maybe that just has to wait until we know whether we really have any legal mechanisms to enforce testing. Does it sound reasonable? Would that be an influential factor? I think Rebecca said it would for her. For me, I am concerned, although I like testing better. How do we know that people are really going to do the testing is certainly a problem. If we feel that that's the way to go. So, based on the discussions, I think I'm hearing that we can't make that decision right now, but can we say anything about this automatic leap to treatment?
That's the one that I would be willing to change if you are convincing me that the treatment might be as bad as the disease. But are there any other options? I think that we could have
Well, no, I wouldn't eliminate treatment, but I would have a different level at which
all right.
treatment
So
would
I
be
would totally
required.
be in favor of raising the level because of our methods that are more reliable before whole house treatment is required for the reasons that you suggested.
Mhm.
But I think I need to hear. I guess it might need to be at a lower level if we have no ability to enforce the rules. If we can enforce the rules, then we could maybe make it a
Mm.
higher level.
Mhm.
If we really have no ability to enforce it, then we might not be able to change very much.
Yeah.
We could say something like, if you're willing to monitor, but if we can't enforce it anyway, it's all irrelevant.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Good point. No, I understand. Good point.
I'm just listening. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm wondering if until we can get some answers from town council, is it worth making a change to something very conservative? Right, because maybe we don't want, as you're saying, we don't want to leap all the way up to the MCL. Because then there's no buffer there. So maybe we do get conservative and pick something like,
I remember one of the LSPs.
25 or 50% of the MCLG.
Yeah,
And at
she
least
thought
that's
that
still
that would
very
be-
conservative.
More reasonable.
Right, and then again, we can revisit this once we get more input about how effective can we be with some sort of ongoing monitoring regime if people don't want to go into, some other level of action, that the alternative would be to monitor and that we could enforce that, compliance with that.
But the benefit is that, to address what our audience is saying, is that if it clears, then it could be very helpful.
And if it's these very low levels, we might just get it high enough above zero without going too far, but at least for the interim period. Again, perhaps revisit this, but I don't know how many of these cases are ongoing actively right now. And we have people drilling wells all over the place because of the drought, so, but,
I do not know of any that I know
in terms of having hits, yeah. No, but I just mean we have a lot of activity going on right now, so,
It's been, if they have a hit, it's usually been introduced to erroneous. We haven't seen where it's the source.
yeah. But that doesn't mean we won't. We have General Chemical. Somebody tries to do something over there, not their issue, not something they can fix, so, I don't know.
So, to your point, Rebecca, you mentioned one of the LSPs making some of the points. I have here in Ellen's initial not voted on minutes. That same LSP made a couple of points about that beyond a DEP standard would put us on shakier ground. That was her quote.
Except that it's also hard because it's. Wait, wait, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm listening. No, go ahead. No, I don't mind. We're kind of having a discussion, so that's fine. Talking about this building and safety standards, conceptually, she didn't agree with it to build in the safety factor, which is what you two were talking about. But the reality is that a lot of standards aren't current. Goals are not standards. MCLs are the standards. So again, that's what I keep coming back to. That's all.
Yeah. Now I'm confused because I thought that they were recommending that we use the MCLG rather than the MCL.
No, I never heard that from one of the LSPs that you're mentioning. I never heard that that was the recommendation.
Okay, so I might be,
That's what we talked about.
okay,
But her point kept coming back to, that's a tough,
right, that we should
Tough
use
point
the
to get to.
MCL rather than the MCLG. Okay,
she kept saying the MCL's a standard.
yeah.
And that's justifiable and
Mhm.
defendable, and
Right. Okay, right. So I
That's
think
what
I
the-
must have remembered it backwards, and I
that's what the
apologize.
minutes reflect, that we
Yeah, well,
haven't
that's why-
reviewed yet.
The minutes are very helpful, thank you.
So since what we have now is far more restrictive than using the MCL or the MCLG, and I don't know if this is maybe based on your knowledge from being involved with the MAHB, but by changing off of what we have now that's very restrictive to something in the middle, are we somehow, is that decision exposed to a different level of scrutiny than staying where we are now?
That was kind
Does
of
that
Maybe.
question make sense?
Maybe. Because there's some inherent assessment that we're doing by changing it. And of course, legal is all process. It's not the bottom line. So what process did you work through and how did you get to that? Whereas if it's just what it is now, it just remains as our best decision-making that we have to this point, or to our knowledge base, or to our review of this. But once we are voting on something to change, I would assume the question comes up of, well, how did you assess that, and what did you bring what did you bring to bear that you made a change? So I assume inherently, yeah. It says, yeah, there is some scrutiny. And that's what I'm bringing up here.
Right, which is an interesting, I admire, as opposed to, all right, so, we could reference the MCLG, which is published, it is EPA, they state how their methods are for obtaining those numbers. If we did a percentage, it's bringing what you're talking about is this is, and what our current regulations reflect of, this is the one chance, when the well's going in, it's the one chance to say something. So, and that to me would be the argument for picking some percentage towards the MCLG. But beyond that, I am relying heavily on the EPA's due diligence to have come up with those numbers. And then I think the other piece I like about relying on that too is it's something that the EPA is revisiting as new information comes out. So it makes it adjustable over time as they find out new information. They might raise or lower, usually lower, what they've established already through that.
If I may, this-
But right, our selection of a percent is really to address that, the one-shot deal to have some sort of influence over how people are managing their private water supplies.
So-
Just like the zero tolerance right now is that one-shot deal.
If I can, this is all coming to mind as we're discussing this. It's a difficult decision. The board, as it relates to groundwater, we just had that discussion just a few minutes ago, has left some leeway for the applicants to come in with a preponderance of technical evidence. So maybe, I don't see an issue up there, but if there is, maybe have a statement of the same type. I'm looking at section 5.1B. It's not related to drinking water, but it's related to some opportunity for the applicant to come in to discuss groundwater contamination. I'll try to relate that to maybe have some wiggle room for, some opportunity for the applicant to come in with a preponderance of information to say it's not the source, or whatever they wish to bring in through a professional hydrologist or say a licensed site professional. I mean, 'cause it's a difficult decision to make. And maybe that's where you set up the criteria that you're discussing tonight, so you're not boxed into one decision for all. Because as I said, I don't see it too often. I haven't seen an issue with a well in a long time.
Right, except we just heard about somebody who wrestled with the
Not
I
that
don't
issue.
have, I
That
mean,
was-
I just think
that was
it's easier
introduced.
to have a standard and to follow it than to have every single case a big, long debate that takes 3 hours. I just think we should have have a standard that we can justify with the best available scientific analysis, recognizing that there are going to be variations with each case. But I think it'll just simplify things a lot. There's too many opinions, there are too many gray zones. I think we should just make it easier by keeping it consistent. I don't know. That's my. We're like not
All right.
making any progress, but I'm.
How about if, I'd like to make a mini motion. And then I have a second bigger motion. The mini motion would be that we strike "and health effects" from the requirement in the deed recording.
That wasn't in your proposal.
Where is that?
Oh, was it? I thought I had it in there, that I took it out. Oh, darn. Oh, it was in my second version. That was at our second meeting. But, okay, so I thought we could, in the course of reviewing these, we could make edits to the wording.
Of what you were proposed,
Yeah.
but that wasn't a motion.
Oh, we can't deviate out of,
I'm
This
not
is the
sure,
posted.
but that's what was proposed, and that's not what was proposed. I don't know, maybe again, you should probably ask.
Daryl,
okay.
Daryl, I think if Peter were here, he would tell you that you don't even have to have a public
No,
hearing.
I know, on the water supply side, I realize that.
So therefore, I think you're well inside of what's been discussed these last 3 public hearings. And it's-
Right, it's only septic that are required, although in the spirit of following things and making it an open and transparent process in the town, I think that we've always tried to stick to what's done for septic, for water supply. Right, I thought it was more like town meeting, where there's proposals, but there are also motions to make amendments on the floor, and so that's, I thought it applied here too, but I don't know. I assumed it applied here too, but is there a hand up? Do you know offhand, Chris? Which would imply that that was the case. And just putting aside the fact that water supply is different and we could change well regulations without a public hearing. But let's pretend that we're just doing it the same as the septic side of the house. That we would have to post a whole new meeting if we, based on all these discussions and kind of the evolution, that might be what we'd have to do anyway.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. That would be,
Well, the last regulation change was tobacco,
but it's.
and we had the wording
Yeah, and
as
that's what
written.
the purpose of having the wording. coding on that word.
No, but again, I'm just relating it to all the times at town meeting where someone said, oh, yeah, but and amended with this, and it's written out and submitted, so I understand getting it firm. But
I don't believe
Yeah, I don't think so. We use boards of health or regulations. Whereas city council or town council is more ordinance type of situation. It's, regulations have to be written as enforceable and penalties assessed based on what's written. So I think that's why we put it out there for in written form and vote on it.
And that's also why I was reluctant,
Oh, okay. And I just assumed it could be, yes.
it was very unusual.
Oh, right, and actually, that line, I just, have to get filled in by someone in the know. Okay. Is there anything we can move on to that we might be able to? Yeah, so it sounds like we have too many questions, so the things we didn't want in this original version, so unless we're willing to vote this original version, we have to do something else. Okay. I'd like to say that maybe depending on whether we can arrange something with town council and how much time they might have on Monday, or looks like maybe Monday would be the only day, Monday or Tuesday. You had both Monday and Tuesday, right? Possible? Okay. Is that,
You think
Contact
council's
them
gonna
again
meet
and
with us
try to-
Monday or the warrant?
Unlikely, but it's worth asking.
but whether I just push that we can get some answers so we can recraft and make some decisions on this, if any.
It's worth asking.
And is it worth asking the question of defensibility of the regulation at all, staying as is versus changing? It sounds like
I
that's,
think any question is up for,
okay.
I mean, this is the problem, it gets into a risk assessment. Once you come off of zero, we've already mentioned that everyone kind of has their own risk assessment, and
Yeah.
unless people don't think about it, which is maybe a majority of the population. So there's that, and then you get into what's acceptable individually. Is it 1 in a million cases of liver cancer? Is it 1 in 10,000? Where do people draw their own line?
Right. I think what I was taking is that if we already have, and as Rebecca pointed out, we already have this notion of the early warning system, and really moving off of zero is just modernizing that in
Yeah.
a sense. So it's the same logic that's present for the current regulation, and if we use that same logic, modernize a bit, are we really opening up the floodgates for all sorts of unintended changes, or would that be supportable? So I would like to understand that.
Yeah. I don't
You'd
know.
like to think that if the current one could stand unchallenged, that could stand. But,
Not necessarily.
yeah, right. So I understand your point, but. Sure.
If you do a hybrid, where you still stick with zero, and if it falls within a certain range, then say quarterly testing.
Yeah, that's what we said right before you walked in the door.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what we are leaning towards.
Because if you went to that, the number of properties that you have to be, and you may want to say, you've had to have tried 3 times, or whatever the number that you decide. And the number of properties are going to be so small, I don't even think it's really going to be an issue. And that way you're not moving away from 0, you still get because the vast majority of the projects, the wells that we saw, it took several times to test. But most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it was fine.
Yeah.
So if you did some kind of a hybrid, and I think most people do want to follow the rules.
Yeah. We were saying that if you, first of all, the enforceability thing might influence the thresholds, because if it's easy, then great. If it's really, really hard, then it's totally impractical, or if it's really expensive, it's just unrealistic. But if it's not enforceable, then, why bother making it complicated? And then if we have, I'm speaking for myself, but if we have the ability to easily monitor, we can say, this is what we recommend, and your choice. But if there is not evidence of monitoring taking place or information being gathered, then that would give us there would be some point at which we would say, okay, we might have to require notification, or we might require a deed restriction, or recording or something like that. But we don't have to have a deed recording if there's evidence of monitoring going on.
That's exactly, I think
Yeah.
you don't need them both.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're saying. Be nice to not have to automatically get a deed recording, especially if it has a potential to clear up or whatever, be proven, a lab error or unreliable or whatever.
A lot of times these things do clean up over time.
Yeah.
They do.
But if the town council says, there's no way, and there's no, we can't do that, and you're going to need, then we have to keep our lives simple, but we also have to be practical. So I think, unfortunately, I think it would be, at least I think it'd be valuable to hear what they say so that we can simplify things.
I didn't realize you already had.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I was-
Right, and it's sort of where the whole thing started anyway, was, trigger point and blah, blah. So, yeah, and
I can see a strong argument that you need to have enforceability where there's a clear risk.
Yeah.
And so I think we can all agree that's definitely at the MPLG. And also, if something's going to affect someone else's health. If
Yeah.
you don't treat that syphilis, then someone else might
Right.
get the syphilis, right? So that's also very important. It's less justifiable, and I think also perhaps less critical, that you have to have enforceability if you're at threshold way below that. I could even see an argument for, between 0 and 10% of the MPLG, recommend retesting. It can be, please do. And then at some point you can require it, but if you can't enforce it, is that really the end of the world if there's still 50% of the MPLG?
Yeah, well, if you require passage of that information at a real estate transaction, hopefully you can address it that way. And so I think that's part of the idea as well, to keep it simple, but also to have it have thresholds, and that for our action and for their action, if it's realistic.
I guess I'm just saying that just if retesting is not completely enforceable, it may still be very valuable. And
Yeah.
I don't think you have to get too uptight. I think people will do it. I really do.
Yeah, most people will, and I also think that we want to keep things simple for
Yeah.
all the involved parties.
Deed recordings are not simple, and they're forever.
Right, which is why we're saying that, I think that if we think about this well before we sort of make it into a regulation, I think hopefully we can make it into a practical, useful, more modern regulation. I don't know, that's my goal.
Okay. I think then that in terms of discussing the definition of the NCLG, repairs and
Kind
plumbing,
of push to the
the
side,
other,
you know.
semi-public water supply. That one was
There.
incredibly complicated and why?
The gallonage,
Oh.
people had a real issue with. It doesn't seem like anything can be brought up and discussed without.
But it is something that was DEP in
Sure.
projects where public water is available, is you know,
I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
without saying it, there are gallonage levels that
yeah.
DEP uses, and I think Darrell was trying to go off of that, but that wasn't even well received, so.
Right.
There it
Well,
is.
yeah, I know.
Right, I was thinking about it, but now maybe we would be changing the wording because it's not what was published. But again, if we're staying in the spirit, it's still water supply. Is to look at it in terms of for anything other than a single, match it up to the way that regulatory section is. Anything other than a single family dwelling on a single lot will be a semi-public water supply and establish that, because I didn't know that.
That would be much simpler.
But what if you have the au pair suite over the garage?
All right.
We just talked about it earlier.
Or the campus.
Yeah. The campus. Have 3 houses.
Right.
Or 4.
In our houses.
Lost count.
Okay, so,
All right, so here's, just to review that a little, because I think it's important, given the kinds of development that's going on that has different issues than, and it's not fallen into the mass DEP public water supply system.
then why
We don't go ahead specifying yet what the requirements are, but we at least make it more clear that we're going to consider something as semi-public water supply. Is that valuable at this point or not valuable until we flesh out what other requirements we might have? Although I'd still like it to be
I would
long-term
like,
a little more EHIR-like that says we can't pick one set of rules for all scales of projects, and that there is something to scale and level of activity.
I mean, I think the enforceability is always going to be an issue, and we know that everything we have is private systems. So, I don't know. I think it's beneficial for public health, and this would definitely accomplish that goal,
We don't have the
however
resources.
controversial. And the question is, if this were to go into effect, whose responsibility is it? You know, if it's a Leland Farms, I mean, it isn't, so I'm using that because it's easier, because it doesn't have, whose responsibility is it? The owner? I don't, you know, and so that might be another legal. Right, so they do it
Yeah.
because we ask them to, because,
But they didn't ask the state.
the state has asked them to. But this would be,
Yeah.
the problem is this would,
Be us. We
Oh.
have an online data
You're right.
submittal system
Developer
that
and then condo,
DEP
So-
has.
condo association or what
I
have you.
mean, in the ideal world, it would be, if it's a condo, it would be a condo association has to take on that role on behalf of the future residents.
No, and they do that now.
That's one and the same. Future residents are the condo association.
Right. But the enforceability is the issue because the state's not asking for it.
No, it's us.
Right.
If we're making the regulation, we're enforcing the regulation.
All right, so we're back to the basic enforceability question before we have appetite to.
Right. I would be in favor of this if it's enforceable.
And you're going to need additional resources as time goes on with your budget. Just being realistic. As you
Or
said.
maybe we need more resources anyway because what people want is
Yeah.
more service.
Which is fine. I'm just saying, in this case, you definitely, I just had this conversation this morning,
Yeah, you're right.
and you need resources to enforce programs of this nature. And it wasn't even related to this, it was an idea
Yeah.
of the same nature, having people tested wells annually. And this is only 150 wells. And I explained to that person, it's a great idea, but just for example, the state thought testing your septic system annually was a great idea, but there was only one town that did it, and it was based on the equipment they received because of the tremendous amount of resources, and especially if there are some that will say no, and then what do you do? You know, so no matter what programs you're looking at, the concept is, I think,
Right.
in my view, a great idea, but the resources will be needed.
Do we want to have a motion to take no action on the suggested changes to 2.4 and 17?
No, I would actually have a motion to take action on it.
Okay.
I mean, that would be,
What's
do
your
you want to
motion?
get into?
No, what's your motion?
Okay.
I understand Daryl's, but proposed motion. What would it be?
Definition of semi-public water supply, are we really ready to?
Okay, so maybe we're not ready. Just like we're not ready to do anything.
So what were you saying?
I would be in favor of this. This one I would be in favor of.
No, I still
But
think they're important.
I
things to
but I
be done.
understand if there are important things to review.
Well, I think it's ridiculous if we are saying a single family dwelling on a single lot for just the reasons we talked about earlier with a campus. So that's kind of silly, I think.
Yeah.
The 2,500 gallons, have we ever had a home that's come close to single family?
Or farm.
Or with,
That's a lot of water, that's,
Yeah.
That's a lot of water.
that's like 20 bedroom home, or 22 bedroom home.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You have not seen one.
Not rolling it out.
I said, yeah.
That's why I was saying that one I would actually be comfortable voting on because I would.
maybe it's too high. I was just trying to pick something, enough above.
I thought it tailed off the state definition. I thought that's why the 2,500 was there.
Because they have
Yeah.
10,000, so it's,
But there's a range in there. Right, Mark? What's the state range? Put you on the spot here.
And I have to say, I don't know much. I know everything's.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah. Most of the is gallons on is the bedrooms, not
Yeah.
in 10. But there are numbers at the state level as well. 10, I don't want to go there, Chris. 'cause
Right.
I know 2,000, 10,000 for Title V, but
2,000.
it's where you have to design it with an engineer versus an IRS.
Okay, it was 2,000. Yeah, it's the one I'm thinking of.
do we want to match it to 2,000?
Well, now I need that definition because
That's only a design consideration in Title V.
okay, it's not a
Who
definition.
designs it? It just says that if you're designing for 2,000 gallons or over, a registered sanitarian's not allowed to do it, basically. It has to be done by me.
All right, motion to table 2.4 and 17.3 for the time being. Is that further?
7.3F.
Yeah, or G.
So it's number, proposal number 2 and number 4.
Oh, yep.
Proposal 2, 4, and 5 for the time being.
And 3. This is terrible.
And 3 is, 3 doesn't really matter. I mean, that's not
I
really,
don't see a point in
It's not
adding it until
play.
we're ready to use it.
it's not really at play.
Yes. Okay. So number
That's my
1.
motion. Table 2, 4, and 5 for the time being.
Did you say 3?
Nope, we don't have 3. 3 is just nothing anyway. 5's nothing, 3 is
Do we have a
2, 4.
second on that?
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
it's very sad
I
that
think we,
we
go
accomplished
with
nothing.
the agenda.
Well, we should well because we've covered the issues, we just haven't finalized our decisions.
Do we want to talk about 1 and 6?
Well, I think the head got handed on the platter with 1, if I recall from watching the video. I mean, that was in good spirit. It was based on extensive discussions we had with the development in town. It made sense to us, but to general public, it made no sense. And
Except I think they were interpreting it as not, you know, allowing some greater flexibility. They were assuming it was narrowing.
That's right.
flexibility.
Can I ask
So
you a
it was-
question?
I think it was
They assumed
misunderstood by
it
many.
was completely misunderstood by
Um,
at least a majority of the crowd, and it was brought forth with the best intentions, again, with having research done and discussions
Right.
with the developer in town, and it was completely taken as heavy-handed regulation by the Board of Health, so
Right.
I don't have
Did-
an appetite to
Can
move
I
on
ask a
that one at
question
this
too,
point.
Mr. Burkeson? Did you use perchlorate explosives when you were preparing your explosives containing perchlorate? Oh, that's good. Okay. I was wondering, no, I was just, no, this isn't a rule that exists.
No, I understand.
I was
just-
curious. I was
understand
just curious
completely.
if this
They
was.
broke rock with a hammer, you didn't.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just curious because I don't know. I'm listening to Daryl and I thought it was a good idea, but I don't know how many people this would affect. And I was curious how common it is and if this is the kind of thing that,
I have no explanation.
so it didn't apply to you anyway, so I'm sorry for asking.
There are certain well drillers who will use it for improving well yields for.
But as far as you know, this wasn't used in your property, so that was actually what I was interested in, whether we were gonna,
I do not believe it was.
So I'm
It's also in
comfortable
fireworks.
making a
Yeah.
motion to table 7.1. That's the simple motion,
Item number 1.
item number 1 on 7.1.
I mean, I'm personally, I'm
And I-
ready to just vote it in as it is.
Well,
I
let
would
me make the
support-
motion, see if there's a second, and then I have some discussion on it. Is there a second?
But your motion is to table?
Table that one.
Okay, then I'll second the motion.
Okay, so my discussion is, I'm perfectly fine with what we came up with and how we came up with it. And again, doing case-by-case basis. It shouldn't take us, we were trying to do this to standardize something and to make it clear and make it simpler, and it was taken completely the wrong way. So I'm fine with going back to the old way, but just spending a few extra minutes going through it on case-by-case and just voting it in the way we did originally, which got us to this point. But it shouldn't take that long to do it. We were trying to simplify for
Okay,
folks,
so you're
but
saying now that we have the precedent of the
Yeah,
one example,
sure.
that just go off now?
I'm comfortable pushing that through again and again and again on a case-by-case basis. I'm not making the motion so that we don't allow this. It's just, we're going to have to take it up on a case-by-case basis. And we did, and we hashed through it, and it was fine.
Okay.
And it shouldn't take that long to do it going forward, because it won't come up that often. So that's why I make the motion to table that. It's not to not go with this, it's just the opposite. It's to go with this, but on case by
On a
case.
different
That's all.
mechanism.
That's fine. I mean,
Taking
people
all
are
the-
usually reasonable.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna try and, I mean, I really want to see something happen on the volatiles front, item 6. So I will impress upon town council as best I can the urgency of them getting back. Isn't it item 6, the one on?
That's the,
Yeah, that's the one. Oh, 5, item 5, I'm sorry.
are you going to vote on 3 and
No.
6?
Maybe 6, not 3. We don't need to do it on 3.
Well, or vote to take no action? Or is that going to, are you continuing the public hearings, continuing the discussion of these two?
I would be in favor of that.
Yeah, I think I would want to.
Have you, as a board,
Continue on that, because let's say for some, town council has some marvelous way to address something. I would like to be able to look at that. I also want to get clarification on, and maybe, again, I don't even know that, I'd like to get legal clarification on for our hearings, if it was Title V, would we have to have presented the exact language that we're voting on without any modifications to the discussions? And then the second piece of that is if that's yes, given that this is public water supply, then either we speak with town administrator or something about, do we really want to set that public hearing precedent that we're going to do something that's within our authority to do, but the board has not done. It's always followed this process of treating our regulations and the review of them the same as the requirements for that review for septic. So I'm hesitant to vary it merely because we can, because I just think it's a better way to go about it, perhaps with public. Although I also thought a better way to go about it would be able to vary based on input and new ideas that came without having to re-announce a whole public hearing and have that lag. So
Except we should probably have had all of this discussion first, come up with what you wanted, then have the public hearing and then just.
yeah, I think that makes more, that's what I was about to ask.
well, no, but what we got was feedback through the public hearing that affected how we thought about this. That's the part that the public hearing does to me. People weren't showing up at our meetings when it was on it talking about regulatory changes when they see it's a public hearing and then they come.
Well, I said this before, and this is what I want to ask you as a board. Have you considered the possibility of us having a workshop where we discuss these things and people can come to that?
But that's what we did in all the meetings prior to the announcement of the public hearing. We would talk about these things, we'd talk about what we might do. That was what we were doing. It wasn't a dedicated meeting just to doing that, like what you're saying
I know.
right now. But that's what that purpose
No,
was.
I
of it
understand
being
that,
on the agenda
but
all
I
the
find
time.
it, for the way my brain works, I would like to sit down, have like a 2-hour chunk of time and focus on the regulations, plow through them, address the different issues, and then come up with something that covers a lot more ground, and that then that's how I would do it, but so I'm wondering if you've thought about that, because I find it less efficient to have each thing, but I understand that the amount of work that goes into it is much more palatable when it's broken up. So I'm wondering if you guys would consider that in January, or something like that, or
Yeah.
if that's something that would be reasonable, or if it's just me being a pain.
No,
to work
I
with.
could see certainly for the semi-public water supply side of things that could be appropriate there. But again, right, just like it, somehow the public hearing to me is the way to get those extra little nuances that you say, oh, that's a fantastic
Yeah,
point,
for sure.
and let's weave it in.
But if people know, like, if somebody is really interested in the regulations, like some of the LSPs who are in the audience. They don't want to come to every single meeting for a little chunk. They might also want to rather come for an hour and then be able to tell us their thoughts about 5 things or something like that. And I would, for me to be able to prepare and focus in the area that's, I would find that to be good. because I
So
would
I'm
do
not
my
clear,
part.
what do you mean by workshop? Because I thought you meant just
Yeah.
the 3 of us, but now it sounds like you mean have
I guess
volunteers, experts,
yeah.
townsfolk that.
I guess I would ask for input, because
paying
you've done
people.
this more.
Right, and I guess for
I
me,
think-
I went and I just read and researched and, you know,
Right,
so
right.
on
No, I
the side, that's
understand.
what I
Yeah.
was doing on the side versus in a workshop, because I have to think about it and read up on it. I
Right.
couldn't just show up and talk about it, so I guess I'm always doing that in the background, and then coming.
Right, I know.
Saying,
Thank
okay,
you.
here, this is a possible approach, and this balances this
Well,
and
what about
this.
having a designated hour for us to work among ourselves, followed by, I don't know. What
Yeah,
what
no,
do
I
you think
think I
would
see
work?
what you mean, follow.
By a time that we could take comments, people can listen in, or just come for the public comment part. But I mean, what you're saying is it would be more useful to have a draft of something to give to people to be able to read in advance and come and comment on. So that I don't know. That's why I'm bringing it up for discussion. I would like to focus, plow through, get a lot of work done, and then produce something that covers more material. But that's how I would do it. That doesn't mean that you have to do it that way.
I mean, it's great conceptually, and I think we have some good brain power in this town. Unfortunately, the regulation proposed change number 1 is a good example where we had hashed through this, had buy-in from the developer who was on board with it, and it got nothing but resistance in a strong manner. So it just gets a little frustrating trying to, where we thought we had hashed through it, had some good ideas on it, was trying to standardize something. It was,
Right.
it
But it
ended up
doesn't
being
have to
just the
include the stuff
opposite.
we've already covered. It could just.
But I guess my point is, let me just finish my point, is that those in the audience had strong opinions on it who we didn't consider had been experts at it, like supposedly we were because we had hashed through it, but then they brought in strong points. So there's a lot to be brought into it, both by people who have knowledge and those who
Right.
don't have the knowledge or the recent knowledge that we had hashed through. So, yeah, I think a workshop could be helpful, having it a set amount of time. We're going to do this for 2 hours. It might get some buy-in if they think it's going to be this rambling discourse of till midnight. I don't think they'd even show up for 2 hours. So, you know, if you give not only a start time but an end time, I think that might help. And so maybe.
Yeah, I think it
Not
depends
a
on
bad
the
idea.
comment too.
I mean, we think it's a good idea, but I don't know.
Because in a way, a lot of the comments we got on item number 1, and I think folks were missing the point, so the point of the public hearing is so we can get input and what have you, but in the end, we need to decide how to use that input. On that, I was not swayed necessarily, and there were some people who did support it, who understood, I thought, the issue more completely, and then item 5 is just very interesting to hear kind of the mix of things, and great to hear from some professionals. Again, I could still pretty much be happy with what's here now, subject to that whole enforceability issue. Otherwise, this comes close to what we've been talking around about. Except for piece about, does it crack open its vulnerability or anything else. So, and then we lose that, potentially lose the protection we want to be able to offer people on this one-shot deal. And DEP doesn't give great guidance on that.
Right.
Or support. Because they have a different situation, they're regulating things that get checked all the time.
True.
All right, so we'll leave open the others. And if we have to, hopefully we can get some answers, so it'll not be, oh, but you're not here the next meeting, but I'd like to keep it moving if we can, but then you're not here. So,
So we're continuing to
16th meeting, are you back the 16th? But what else did we put on the planning board? Yeah.
This is
Yes.
probably more important than the planning board is going to present. So I can tell them when to move the date,
Okay.
because it may be a lengthy discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to think that if we can address these few issues, maybe we could just decide on what changes we might make, or not make any.
Well, let me ask you, on the final one, what do you know about explosives or perchlorate explosives? I know nothing about this. I know what I've heard.
I know that there are alternatives, that's about all that I know.
It sounds like we're voting on something and kind of winging it, if you ask me. What if they don't make the alternative explosive anymore, and now people can't
No,
use
but I
explosives to
don't,
remove
no,
the
actually,
ledge?
they've moved away from perchlorate.
I understand, but
But is it 20
I
times
don't
the
know.
cost? Right, I don't know.
yeah,
if it's 20
exactly.
times the cost.
That's the point.
And in a way, it's like salting or sanding roads. It's okay, necessary for public safety. It's how you do it. You know, are you
Yeah, I
down.
just don't know what.
carefully or not carefully?
So you're adding a potential prohibition on our guidebook, our regulation book that is potentially health related or potentially hamstringing a project that doesn't have alternative or does. I don't know. I just have no idea. It's not my area by a long shot. Again, great
DEP did some big studies.
Great idea.
For chlorates and blasting and all that sort of thing.
I mean, it seems like a good idea on the surface, and then start getting into the weeds a bit, and maybe it is a good idea, just on the face value, vote it, put it in there, or maybe it isn't, I just don't know.
We'll leave that one for the moment then. All right, so is the 16th a good date? Is that okay?
What are we doing with advisory, Chris, 16?
It wasn't advised.
Planning board.
I'm sorry, planning board.
It was scheduled for 7 hours.
I'm sure that can be moved.
Right, so we could move that one into, we could move that to beginning of December maybe, if they're graciously offering.
I'm ready to talk about that now, so I don't mind if that gets bumped up. I mean, what's Marion's thought on?
Oh, you mean move it up to the, to
We can do,
the 3rd,
we can do whatever you like.
the 2nd?
So I'm gonna tell her the second. Does that work with your schedule? Would that
It's
fit you?
okay with me.
Has she sent you documents?
Yeah, I've read through it.
Okay.
And I had some points. She didn't really want the points at the last meeting. She wanted us to wait till we met formally.
Correct.
Weren't there revised documents though?
Yes.
Provided at the last meeting.
And The
Okay.
one that you're gonna be looking at, we're gonna be working on this Friday, so it's gonna be revised again.
Okay,
And then with your input, it will be revised again.
right.
We'd rather get everyone comfortable with it before it's all put together.
Okay.
So I'll make sure you get the revised documents.
I'm okay with not the revised, third edition revised, because
It's gonna change again.
it will, and it's, the basic form is there, and if we offer a suggestion that's already been revised, then you can just strike our suggestion that it was already revised like we did on that first one, so.
All right, so let's move this into the 8:30 slot, and if
On the
16th November? Is that
Yeah.
16? No, okay.
What are we putting?
Just if we can resolve this one, right? The ones that we have outstanding. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Move the meeting with
Planning board to the 2nd, I guess a little bit pending whether that actually works for,
It will work.
oh, okay,
We'll make sure it works.
oh, okay.
So on November 2nd, if we have a variance hearing, and then I'm inviting Michael Saracen.
Mhm.
What time do you want me to have him come in? And then what time would you like him to
So,
come in?
is it 7:30? And let's see.
Come in at 7:50. And then
For him, for Michael, and then assume that by 8:30, so, yeah, 8:30. 8:30 okay again on that? Okay,
Yeah, it was this, with the blue.
okay. Okay, so we're continuing the hearing on several of these items, the untabled items, on November 16th at 8:30. All right. Anything else on the agenda?
Alright, so. Motion to adjourn?
Happy Rose status.
I think that's on there every time.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so I just got a little Abbey Road status from Ethan. Did you have anything in particular that you want to go over? He said that he's been out inspecting the septic system and that's moving along. I guess there have been some challenges because it's a large system and everything has gotten worked out in the end, but there were some things that were done that weren't anticipating, certain things like the alignment of a manhole over a connection so that it wasn't easily inspected, and so some adjustments had to be made. So I think he's communicated that to the installer to try to, some things are field changes, but some things do affect then whether it can be seen, inspected, or affect something
But
else.
everything's in good shape.
They have made, when those things have happened, there have been corrections made.
It was
So-
described to me as there were a few minor changes that were made,
So,
but
yeah, so I think now that they've been through that, hopefully the installer will contact him more frequently or something before embarking on those things to save some of that, having to go back and redo or do something additional. So that was really his only report. He said that otherwise they've all been, all the matters so far have been addressed, but they were coming up. again, it is a big system, so there are lots of opportunities for that to happen. And actually, I'd like to add to a future agenda, but we're not ready. I think we have enough other things to discuss. Future agenda that for larger projects, for these large systems, that we might need to make provisions for extra inspections, because that might have also helped along the way, to just have maybe an extra fee or something for the large systems so that there's more availability of an agent to go out.
I think there's already a fee in the fee schedule for additional inspections. There is, it's in there.
Yeah, but when do we trigger? It's at the request of additional inspections or?
And more than 3 construction inspections.
I was thinking more somehow, and again, this is why I'd wanted for a future discussion, is how based on the size of a system to really anticipate that there may be more, as opposed to a more optional, on the fly sort of thing, just so that it would be.
Standardized.
Yeah, but how to standardize that is going to be another complicated
25%
issue.
completion.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that fee for it.
So, but we could just talk about that, just so it'll be anticipated and there won't be any hesitation on anybody's part on when that's going to trip something, and someone can just avail themselves of the agent to come out more often and take a look at things.
Motion to adjourn.